A bright yellow chandelier hangs from the ceiling, illuminating the room and making it sparkle with the light of its many burning candles. It is the dorm room of the ruffian son from a high-ranking noble family, who reigned over the magic academy like a king. The ruffian son is this story's narrator and technical protagonist. He sits in his large luxurious dorm room with a grand bed and rich polished furniture, considering his life. Unfortunately, the ruffian's luck has run out as he's been charged with many egregious and downright unforgivable sins, such as using profanity in the presence of the honorable princess like a foul-mouthed drunken sailor, wrongfully meddling in the entrance examination, disregarding decency, and smearing the family name by getting blinded by jealousy. All of these are sins that his household cannot overlook. To cut a long story short, he's getting stripped like a harlot from the family register because he's made way more trouble than they can put up with. It feels like the god of fate is ridiculing me, he laments with his head in his hands. The ruffian's name is Ed Taylor, and his life was over. He is tossed out of his grand dorm with all his belongings packed in a few brown suitcases. His belongings are also tossed beside him in the dirt, and they don't even bother to acknowledge him once they've thrown him on the floor. "Thank you for your hard work," they say without a drop of sincerity in their tone. Other students jeer at him when they spot him. Some students point him out in shock, and others try not to make direct eye contact like they're scared of catching a disease only he can spread. Ed has become the gossip of the academy, and some of the students wonder about the point of walking on eggshells around him. After all, he was disowned and thrown out of his dorm room, so he has no power to use against them. They likely won't even see him in the next semester. Some of the students blame him for his own misfortune. They felt he should have known better than to attempt to rig the entrance exam, and they call him a filthy noble. All these insults echo through the halls and gardens to Ed, who is left stewing on a bench with suitcases by his side while a dark, depressing aura surrounds him. Ed thinks this is all unfair, and that sort of thinking is to be expected. After all, the arrogant Ed that all the students are jeering isn't even the same person. It turns out that the reality where the magical school exists was actually a game, and our weeping protagonist entered the game while playing on his computer back home. The game was set in the magical school called Sylvania Academy and won the award of Best Game of the Year. The game titled The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania was his favorite game. Our boy is not too surprised about entering a game as he's familiar with this genre in the comics he reads. Usually, when someone enters a game, they end up possessing the abilities of either the main hero or the main villain. It could be someone cool like the first son of a super rich family, a genius ruffian, a young clan master, or a triple S rank hunter character who's badass and always breaks the rules. Unfortunately for our hero, he's drawn the short straw and ended up in the body of a third-rate villain, who gets kicked out of the dorms at the beginning of the game. He's not even a relevant character. His name isn't cool either, because what the fuck kind of name is Ed Taylor? The developers basically designed him to fail. He's possessed the worst of characters at the worst of times, and it is truly a misfortune to land in the body of someone else just after they had messed up beyond repair. Our hero screams into the sky in protest about how unfair his situation is. He's always lived a frugal and simple life with no greed. However, the other students hear him yelling, and think the arrogant Ed is just boasting again and saying things are unfair when he's filled his life with nothing but wicked deeds. They also call him out for saying he's frugal when they know he's a shameless scumbag. That stops our boy short, and he's left gaping in embarrassment and shock. Spirit broken, he sits in humble silence as the students storm away in anger. Our boy sighs and glances to his side, and is surprised to see a status window open before him. It tells him that Ed Taylor is 17, in year 2, and a male of the human race with 0 achievements. The status window also reveals that Ed is useless with a level 3 stamina and level 4 intellect. He, however, has level 7 for talent, level 7 for willpower, and a bonus level 6 for luck, so he's not entirely hopeless. However, my guy is still heavily disappointed by Ed's pathetic stats. Despite studying in the Faculty of Magic, his intellect is next to nothing, and his stamina is way too low for a noble. He figures that this is why Ed never amounted to anything more than a third-rate villain. Because even in his memories of playing the game, Ed exists as nothing but a blur. It's so bad that he can't even recall what happened to him later in the game. Suddenly, our guy is struck with enlightenment and recalls exactly what happened to poor useless Ed Taylor. In a corner of the game's ending credits, he remembers an elderly-looking man with a thin mustache, wearing a suit and crouched in the corner of the street with no shoes. The man was Ed Taylor, and his ending was begging on the streets like a bum. Thinking over it logically, our hero deduces that Ed's end was no real surprise. He'd been a ruffian noble who knew nothing about the world, and was suddenly thrown into the streets. The begging bad ending aside, Ed was lucky that he'd somehow stayed alive. However, the news remained depressing for the poor guy who was now stuck living Ed's miserable life. He was so scared of the future that he turned as white as a sheet, sighing once more in disappointment. He doesn't know why he, of all people, has come to possess Ed's body, and has no idea how to find out the reason behind this mix-up. However, he picks up his suitcase, determined not to let begging become his ending. He stands with determination burning in his pale eyes as he glares ahead. He declares that he will succeed no matter what. for they say, once you've hit rock bottom, the only place to go is up. Despite being a school, Sylvania Academy is more like a city with the entire Arkan Mountains as its premises. The valley is expansive with green grass growing around the white glistening towers of the school. Our guide journeys to the undeveloped forest, northeast of the academy to escape the prying eyes of the students. He is covered in sweat and exhausted, but he makes it deep into the woods and pauses to sit on his suitcase after walking for half a day. Amazingly, he manages to lug both suitcases out of there by himself since Ed is not exactly the most built noble there is. Since he's been disowned and is now the disgrace of the school, there's plenty of time for him to ponder the next step to take, even though his odds aren't looking good. Back in the game, Ed getting disowned was the extreme starting part of the scenario. Though he was disowned, Ed was not expelled. And that part is extremely important, because Sylvania Academy is a top-notch learning facility. Just graduating from Sylvania is sure to get a student a guaranteed and secure future. Thanks to our hero obsessing over the game so much, he can now use the intel of a 5-time dedicated player of the game to its fullest. He still has a chance of success so long as he graduates quietly, then he can acquire a soft, comfortable life, a life even more awesome than the one he left in the past world. So, his obvious goal is graduation. He scratches out that word in the sand, dreams of towers of golden coins flashing in his mind. However, to achieve this newfound dream of his, he first needs to tackle a few issues, the first of which is the steep tuition fees. As someone disowned and kicked to the curb, he has absolutely no money to pay his way through school, and it's not like he's talented enough to get a scholarship either. The good news is the current semester has already been paid for by his wealthy noble family, so he can use the time he has left to achieve a scholarship for the next semester. However, Ed's stats are still looking ridiculous and downright depressing, but our boy is not about to give up just yet, even though he thinks he'd be lucky not to flunk out with those bad stats. He decides he'll worry about tuition later and instead focus on more pressing matters like how he's going to survive now that he's gotten his ass kicked out of the dorms. The things he needs now are food, clothes, and shelter. He snaps open his luxurious suitcase to take a peek at what he has to work with for around the next week to avoid turning into a bum. He finds in his suitcase a collection of showy clothing with no extra stats or powers, ceremonial daggers that are just as useless, and even the more useless ornamental cup. It's not looking good, but at least he has clothes. The problem now is having no place to stay or food to eat, and Ed's awful reputation is not going to make it easy to achieve either. He sits on the floor to ponder the issue, which makes him look like a bum in practice. Since he can't return to the dorm that he was kicked out of, he decides to stick in the woods for the time being. There is at least a clean stream nearby, and that accounts for water. Our boy has 10 days until school starts, so he's going to use that time to whip into shape. Ed starts by practicing the magic move Wind Blade. He uses it to send blades of wind whipping around the forest until he's exhausted. Fortunately, he can use spells, but using spells only made him hungrier, and he's exhausted just from using wind blades to cut down a few tree trunks. He decides the spell is not that useful. He is now frustrated that he got kicked out without at least getting some food. Then, he wonders if getting hungry after using magic is a thing in this world. Because after using magic, he is so hungry that sweat starts dripping down his brow. Suddenly, he remembers something that his grandfather told him when he was young. When barley was scarce while his grandfather was a child, he said they'd eat tree bark in the back mountains. And so, Ed stares dubiously at the barks of the trees he cut down. Unfortunately, he is desperate enough to try it. Within minutes, he's using ignition to boil up the bark of a tree inside the ceremonial cup. Anything edible is good enough for him to try to fight off the hunger. He is so hungry that he convinces himself the tree bark looks like chicken breast. Excited, he stuffs the wood in his mouth and chews with high hopes. As expected, his hopes plummet and he ends up spitting the entire thing out. Humans might be omnivores, but there's a limit. Day 3 in the forest comes around, and Ed is starting to look like a starved, reanimated corpse. He sends his hate to his grandpa for his useless advice. After starving for a day and throwing up for 2 more days, he concluded that he'd stop trying to eat wood and instead use it to build a house. He needed shelter to weather off harsh weather conditions. So, he gets busy. First things first, he raises the frame to support the wood of the house. He only has 2 hands, so he struggles to set up the 4 supports. It is not an easy job, and he quickly crashes during his first pathetic attempt. However, it's either succeed or die trying, so he forces himself to his feet again, his face burning red as he quickly ties the frame into place. He takes a moment to rest after that one success, but he's still got a long way to go. Since he can't sleep on the bare ground, he tosses his luxurious clothes to the floor and uses them as a sort of mat. It's a waste of nice fancy clothes, but it's not like he has a choice. The next day comes, and he successfully crafts a tent made of wood, which he's extremely proud of. The status window suddenly becomes active and informs him that his crafting proficiency has increased since he crafted the basic wood shelter to completion. He is now a novice craftsman with level 4 in handiness, level 1 in design, and level 1 in gathering ability. Ed would be so much more impressed if he wasn't dying of starvation. He does realize though that he missed out on his talents because he was a noble, so he never found out that he's more talented with his hands than he is with magic. So, my guy utilizes that handiness and creates a simple harpoon, a ceremonial dagger strapped to a well-shaped tree trunk. He harnesses his newly crafted weapon like a madman, determined to find something to eat. 2 days on an empty stomach with excessive physical labor has been bad for him. Only desperation keeps him going as he madly jabs at the water in a wild attempt to catch fish. He successfully catches 2 and he roasts them over a fire with the ignition spell. A week until school starts and he finally tastes food, so it's no wonder that his eyes are finally sparkling with joy. He just has to hold out as he is right now. If he can manage to hold out until then he'll be able to get through school without much trouble. However, he was so busy eating that he forgot something important and nearly choked on the fish when someone appeared before him. A beautiful girl with long blonde hair and shiny golden eyes. It looks like in his quest for survival, my guy had completely forgotten about the main characters of the story. But of all the people, he had not expected to run into this particular individual. She is the disciplinarian and strict Princess Fionia, and she's the one who got Ed Rothtailor kicked out of the dorms. The issue is that Ed Rothtailor is a villain who appears as soon as a player starts the game. Using his status as a noble, he hits on the main character's childhood friend only to end up being beaten up and punished for it. However, Ed's vengeful heart is not sated, and he goes on to use his noble influence to adjust the main character's entrance exam for Sylvania Academy. Unfortunately, he immediately gets caught by a girl who came to take the entrance exam while hiding her identity. That girl was Fionia Elias Kloll, and she was their empire's 3rd princess. With her insight ability, she can detect the target's lies and conspiracies. Pathetic Ed Rothtailor was caught in a sad state, gritting his teeth and making excuses, but all of his lies were exposed by Fionia and he was chased out of the dorms. Everyone at the academy of course hated Ed Rothtailor, but he was doomed when he met the one person that he shouldn't have met the most. Now, my guy was unfortunate to have met her again while wearing Ed Rothtailor's body. She is furious to see him, her arms crossing as she immediately deduces that he's up to no good. "What are you doing here?" she demands, furious to learn that he was not immediately expelled. Ed explains that he's still a student even if he was chased from the dorms. However, the princess is not having it, and she demands that he leave. She cannot stand to see a shameless person like him around the school, which would be valid if he was still the scumbag Ed Rothtailor, but he's a completely different person inside. However, Fionia doesn't know this and she's determined to talk to the academic department and personally request for his expulsion. He's in big trouble now. She will demand that he get expelled for the crime of committing a dishonorable act as a student of the academy and for the crime of setting up a fellow student in an attempt to block their path to a better future. Yet, all Ed can think of is his precious food burning away on the fire. However, he also recognizes that his life is in a crisis now that the princess has come around to make threats because she really does have the power to get him expelled. If that's the case, then he's going to get serious. The sun will set soon, he says, his face darkening as he steps towards her, questioning why a royal like herself isn't currently being accompanied by any guards. He turns the tables around and jeers at a noble princess coming to an isolated forest alone. However, Fionia refuses to be threatened and raises her hands in battle as she's not scared of him, even if she doesn't have her escorts. Still, our hero denies trying to threaten her and suddenly gets on his knees, claiming with a bright smile that he's just trying to thank her. This confuses Fionia and she activates her skill of insight. She is shocked to find that there is truth to his words and no lies are detected. Ed notes that she looks surprised. The Rothtailor family that he belongs to is famous and influential, but they use that name to exploit the citizens and do human experiments for research into eternal life. To the main character, it is a trash family that is destined to be destroyed and all the members of the family will be imprisoned and executed in the future. However, thanks to Ed getting disowned, our hero will never have to suffer that fate. The fish he caught is now completely burnt and he may be cold and hungry, but he decides that is better than dying. In the long run, it's a good thing that he got disowned and it puts a bright smile on his face. He decides he will have to convince Fionia without lying, or he'll get expelled, and then it's game over at any chance of living a peaceful and happy life. Looking at the timeline, he deduces that it's about a week before the school starts, and he ponders on why the princess would be in the forest. She has come without any escort, and she's come wearing simple clothing, which makes him realize that she is completing the class placement test. Professor Glass' class placement test is a test to find magic beads hidden in the forest. It is a vicious test, and he knows the noble Princess Fionia would be aiming for the best class, which is Class A. She rebukes him for trying to flatter her, and brings up getting him expelled again. However, Ed interjects and says that without his help, she will never be able to enter Class A. He also adds that if his words are lies, then she can have him expelled. He tells her that if she goes to the lake in the southeast of the forest, there will be a small grassy island. There, she will find a giant tree in the middle of that island, called Merylda's guardian tree, where she shall find the present that he left. Fionia follows his directions and is mystified to find the golden bead hidden exactly where he said it would be. She cannot understand it. She knew Ed Rothtailor to be a liar and a charlatan. However, the Ed she just encountered was different. She is at a loss for words as she stares at the bead. The class placement test officially ends and the professor asks them all to take out the beads they have acquired. Some of the students show up with a bunch of ridiculous beads of different colors. Some have even returned with fruits and eggs. Professor Glass tells those students that they will start from Class F. The test wasn't about finding just any magic bead after all. Only the ones who found beads with the highest magical power, the golden beads, were the ones qualified to enter Class A. Only 3 students found the golden beads. It was Ziggs, a rough boy with red eyeliner and green eyes. Loretal, a redhead hottie with green eyes and a cat-like smile. And lastly, the one who found a bead at the guardian tree of Merelda that had unusually high magic power. The person that found the last bead would be recognized as top of the class, and it looks like the princess is ready to accept that title. Meanwhile, Ed ponders his decision to help the princess. His fish burnt, and he doesn't even have the strength to use the spear anymore. He managed to upgrade his crafting abilities and made a fishing rod. He thinks of the third princess of the empire, Fionia. Since she was young, she'd seen through flattery and sophistry and had sharpened her insight ever since, which led to the creation of her innate skill. No one can escape her insight, so he had no choice but to give her authentic information. Unfortunately, this led to an even greater problem for our hero. The prideful Princess Fionia was supposed to earn the title the Princess of Love after facing failure during the class placement test. However, if Fionia, who has great influence over the early scenario, finds the golden bead and enters Class A, the scenario of the original story collapses. Even if Ed manages to avoid being expelled, all the information he has would become useless if the story changes too much and he'll be done for. Fortunately for him, the top of Class A is awarded to a girl called Lucy Merrill. She is a small silver-haired witch deeply asleep in class. The future did not change. Fionia stomps out of the class deep in thought. Her ability to insight has always seen the truth, and there really was a bead at the tree. However, her hands shook with rage because she could not accept it. The reason she'd hidden her identity in the first place was because she'd feel embarrassed by the special treatment she would get if her identity was exposed. She really wanted to prove herself, and knew from just seeing the bead that it would offer her the best results on the test. Yet, that was exactly why Fionia could not bring herself to accept such a gift, because finding it was not something she accomplished on her own. The title Princess of Love that she would receive in the future was one she wanted to gain only by walking the righteous path. So, with her head down, she turned away from the opportunity before her. Ed threw bait at the princess, knowing it would not matter if it were a truth or a lie. Even if Ed Rothtaler believed that the princess would fail the test, she had confidence in succeeding and rubbing it in his face. However, that confidence crumbled when she was unable to find another bead, which meant that our hero had never lied to her since she was unable to enter Class A without the item he'd directed her to. The princess punched the wall in a rage, since this meant she had to keep her end of the deal and could not get him expelled. However, she swore to keep her eyes on him. Meanwhile, Ed celebrates finally catching a fish even bigger than the sardines he caught last time. He now lives in a place where he has to start running from early in the morning to get to school on time, as there is no means of transporting himself back and forth from his wooden tent to the school. But then again, he is willing to make the effort and races back to school, overjoyed to have returned to the splendor and joy of the Sylvania Academy. The school opening ceremony begins, and the announcers say it is nice to see that the students have made progress before starting the new semester. The announcer tells them to enjoy the food prepared while they listen. As the announcer continued to speak, Ed heard the sweet whispers from his haters that welcomed him back to school. Nobody looked happy to see him back in school. They wondered how he had the face to come to the opening ceremony, and they wondered why he even came back in the first place. However, he doesn't care as he once more gets the chance to eat rich flavored meat, and he proceeds to eat many plates of it like a pig. His goal is graduation, and he doesn't care how many shocked stares he gets. Still, the side characters keep whispering about his disgrace and his manners. Some even admit that he feels a bit different. That's when a group of girls whisper about desserts being made by the head chef of Opheles Hall, and they hurry over to the table where it's being served. A pretty girl with long brown pigtail braids and a bow in her hair remarks that it's strange somehow that Ed Rothtaler feels like a different person. Meanwhile, our hero is out here, simply wishing for nothing unusual to happen. Moving on, a big blue sky brightens another brand new day at Sylvania Academy. It is the first day of school and a new semester. A welcome speech is given to the new students in a grand hall, with the speaker stating their excitement at seeing the students in a new and improved form. It looks like the speaker also looks forward to seeing Sylvania Academy whip them into shape to become functional members that society can be proud of. However, things are not going peaky for everyone, for on the first day of school, our protagonist Ed finds himself in the dean's office. He almost didn't even start the school year because he almost got expelled on the first day of school. Ed had not expected Fionia to tell the dean about him, especially after their little encounter in the forest. Fortunately, the dean was a rather happy fella, and Ed was surprised that the cranky old man spoke with a smile on his face the entire time. He reasons that Fionia must not have said anything bad about him. Since he barely managed to avoid expulsion, he's decided to be a bit more careful and breathes a sigh of relief. With a look of determination on his face, he is prepared to ensure that the story doesn't stray from the original because his peaceful, comfortable life depends on it. Thanks to the life skills he honed for survival, he's achieved the combat abilities of a novice fighter, with his speciality being the bow, but he's only level 1 at it. He also did some magic training appropriate for a student of the Faculty of Magic. To get the best combination of survival skills and magic training, there was no better weapon than a bow. He used these combined skills to hunt down games to eat. As his life skills become more proficient and he becomes better at making good quality arrows, he'll soon be able to cast spirit or magic formulas to the arrows. For now, he'll just hunt down rabbits and keep practicing because spirit formulas are still currently outside what he can achieve. In the middle of his hunt, Ed pauses when he sees an enchanting beauty seated underneath a tree, her hair flowing in the wind. It is the pigtailed brunette, and she sits reading a book, with a pile of books on the floor before her. This beautiful lady is Janica Failover. She is in her second year just like Ed, except that she is also top of the class and a genius spirit sorcerer, unlike Ed. The beauty glances up, her ruby eyes sparkling with beauty. She spots Ed and remarks that he is the amusing guy Merylda was talking about, Merylda being the name of the tree. Surprisingly, though she's heard of him, Janica is actually happy to see him and jovially introduces herself. He is shocked that she immediately leaps into his personal space with a bright, happy smile on her face. She asks if he is surprised that she knows all about him like some kind of creepy stalker. She explains that this forest is the territory of Merylda, a high-ranking spirit, and it turns out that Merylda is a huge gossip. She has told Janice so much about Ed. Ed is shocked that the master of the forest even has that much free time to talk about him to strangers. Janica laughs and explains that Merylda is kind of nosy, like that wasn't already clear. Merylda has her attention all over the place, so it makes sense that she'd know about an unwanted visitor. Ed is just hurt that he's classified as unwanted in his newfound home. Then again, he did kill a lot of animals and cut down so many trees, but just thinking about it makes him feel kind of depressed, and Janica realizes the awkwardness she caused with her tactless statement. She quickly tells Ed not to sweat the small stuff since it's the natural order of things for creatures in the forest to catch and eat each other. Merylda is not bothered by things like that, so Ed has no reason to worry. Ed is a little touched and blushes when he notes that even the huge wild forest master has a tender heart. Meanwhile, the more Janica looks at him, the more she realizes that Ed sort of looks like hot stuff. Living in the wild might not have done wonders for his hygiene, but his beauty stats definitely upgraded. Janica laughs and agrees that it is kind of unexpected that Merylda is a softie. Then she hurries to show him something cute and adorable, a creature she signed a contract with as soon as she saw him yesterday. This creature manifests as a sparkle of light in her hands, and she asks if Ed wants to try touching him. Ed is surprised to see the sparkle of light and wonders if it is a contract or a spirit. If he wants to become friends with Janica, then he needs to chime in at the right time, but Ed instead hangs his head and says that he doesn't know what she means because he does not see spirits. He goes on to say that he lacks the ability to see spirits, shocking Janica, who stares at him in heartbroken surprise. Ed turns away from her, saying that he only came out to get food, so he'll get going now. Only by following the original storyline can he gain an informational advantage, and Janica Failover is someone who holds significant importance in the original storyline. She is someone that he must never get close to, because the future has something incredibly haunted in store for her. He walks away, leaving her behind, and she sadly stares after him. Meanwhile, Janica notes that Merylda was right about her assumptions concerning Ed. Janica agrees that Merylda was right in her assessment of calling Ed a really fascinating guy. As she speaks, she strokes the white furry chin of the forest master, who's taken the form of a giant wolf-like creature. No matter how much she thinks about it, she realizes that Ed really can't see her. She wonders who he is. Also, she tried so hard to be kind to him, but he just answered with yep and left. It makes her so embarrassed that she buries her face in Merylda's fur and squeals with disappointment. However, she takes heart since it's not like this is the last time they'll ever see each other again. After all, they go to the same school and are in the same grade. She can just find out more about him from now on. The distance between Ed's shelter and the student area was not close at all. It was in fact a whole treasure map's journey from point A to point B. Ed barely made it in time for school even when he left at dawn and ran at full speed. Just commuting to school is something ridiculous that increases his stats, so at least it is worth doing. In order to win the scholarship, he has to study more diligently than ever before. He has no money, so he writes on a stone slab using a burned stick, and borrows books to study with from the student library. My guy literally regressed to the Stone Age just to excel academically. On his way home, he washes the sweat from his clothes in the stream. One would think that would conclude his daily chores, but he's just getting started. Life as a broke student isn't easy, and he has to check if he still has any firewood, drinking water, and jerky for his next day's lunch. Due to this extra chore, he only gets 4 hours of sleep. However, doing all this is not what bothers him the most. What bothers him the most is that the entire time he's struggling, Janica keeps following him and keeps a close eye on him like he's her amusing circus monkey. He immediately calls her out for following him around, and she looks shocked that she got discovered when she wasn't even any good at hiding in the first place. He yells that it would be weirder if he didn't notice her awful sneaking skills. Enraged, he asks Janica if she is not aware of his identity. He is Ed Rothtailor, the worst hooligan to exist, and he doesn't understand why she keeps hanging around him. However, Janica points out that the hooligan thing is just what other people think of him and she wants to make her own judgment of him. She sparkles like the sun as she smiles at him, blinding him with her pure beauty. However, Ed is even more disturbed. He recalls that Janica is the kind of person who looks naive and dumb on the outside, but she is very independent-minded and always likes to form opinions by herself. However, none of that is going to change the dark future in store for her. Ed just can't respond with a refreshing smile on his face when he knows what is coming. This is because the sweet and angelic Janica Failover ends up growing into the final boss of Act 1. She is the only character who would smile at a scumbag like Ed Rothtailor. It hurts him to have to push her away, but he cannot mess with the plot because he needs things to go smoothly so that he can succeed. Ed reminds himself that he is a villain, even though he never wanted to go too far. So, he says, in that case, since destiny brought us together, can you do me a favor? Janica is delighted that he's asked for a favor and asks with excitement sparkling in her eyes what she can do for him. Ed explains that he is a mess right now. He's been disowned by his family and he is in a huge pinch, so he asks if she can give him some money. Ed temporarily turns into the beggar he feared becoming. Janica is so shocked she briefly turns to stone, her smile frozen on her face. Quickly, he tries to retain his dignity and stees, saying that of course, he will pay her back as soon as he's back on his feet. The truth is that Ed knows that every year, Janica gets a scholarship for being top of the class, but that doesn't just signify her excellence. Her background is so poor that without the scholarship, the angelic beauty of the school would not be able to advance to higher graduation. In other words, she's just as broke as he is. Janica, the sweetest daughter from a small ranch, has one great weakness, and that is money. The poor girl is so shocked, standing in the clearing at a loss of words. Her stone-frozen figure starts to fade away as she apologizes in pain despair because she cannot help at all, which is exactly what Ed predicted. He hopes that with this he has successfully cut Janica Failover out of his life. It's been 3 days and he's finally been left in peace. Of course, Ed doesn't feel good about purposely asking Janica for the one thing she cannot provide, but he doesn't want to get entangled with the important characters anymore. He should carry on his quiet, peaceful life of living and hunting in the forest. He has to be careful so that the story doesn't stray from the original. He finally makes it home and is about to enter his wooden tent when he freezes in shock. This is because he finds inside his tent a character with an even heavier presence than Janica, the subject marvel of all her classmates and even the professors, the rare genius and the most powerful character in the game, the failed swordsman of Sylvania, Lucy Merrill. He finds Lucy Merrill sleeping inside of his tent, and she wakes with a tired yawn. He is horrified to find her sleeping in his home and wonders what she's even doing in this mountain valley. Lucy mumbles that he is so loud that she can't sleep. Ed is about to ask what he did that was so loud, but the sleepy girl says she's not talking about him. She is in fact talking about the wolf behind him that is as big as a house. It keeps talking to him. Ed's eyes widen to saucers in shock, and there is a bright light behind him. It is Merrill, the forest master. She is a mighty creature, and she requests that Ed someday save Janica at all costs. She is technically his landlady, so already this is a dicey situation. Lucy only spent 2 days at Ed's camp. Ed carries on about his daily activities, an axe on his shoulder and rope in his hands. As he does his chores, he hopes deeply that Lucy spending time in the forest won't lead to any significant changes in the story's plot. Looking back, he can't help but see how complacent he was to think that way, and it did not take him long to realize his folly. Sylvania Academy had started its joint combat training at school. A large auditorium was filled with cheering people and its center was a fighting ring. Joint combat training was a mock one-on-one combat exercise between students, a friendly sport where they could test their abilities without fear of seriously harming each other. To further reduce the lethality of their blows, the school provided most students with fake weapons to fight with. As the student matches rage on, Ed already has an idea of how most of the matches will go, especially the matches of a few special people, such as the sparkly benevolent Princess Fionia with her insight ability, Golden Daughter Lortel with her red hair and cocky smile, Ziggs, who is one of the few students to have gotten into the top class through the beat hunt test, the sweet but broke spirit sorcerer Janica, the slothful Lucy who went and did as she pleased, and the wicked Clebius, who is an edgy-looking kid with dark hair. The list of exceptional protagonists could go on and on without end, and Ed recognizes them all. After all, each named character will turn out to be an important character in the game. The most important character of all is the failing swordsman Taylor, the hero in red with dark glistening hair, burning with a fiery passion and a sharp shining sword that he turns upon his opponents. Ed stares at the ring with bated breath and a sparkle in his eyes like a fanboy watching the concert of his favorite pop idol. He excitedly wonders if Taylor will be fighting next. He already knows the results, so he didn't pay too much attention to any of the other matches. The winners of the duels in the joint combat training were all first-year students, the same as the protagonist, Taylor, who is expected as those winners are expected to make up Taylor's elite team. The only exception among the winners was of course Janica, who is a second year. As if summoned by his thoughts, Janica animatedly pops up by him and greets him with a bright and shining smile, much to his chagrin. Ed is heavily disappointed that she hasn't given up on her attempt to be his friend, especially after they went through the pathetic experience of him asking her for money. Unlike Lucy, who acts like a lazy cat and does whatever she likes, Janica acts more like an eager dog every time she sees him. With excitement, Janica informs him that the list of matches is out. However, Ed is not really interested in the list, crossing his arms and turning away so he can focus on what is happening in the ring instead. However, Janica is not discouraged and she excitedly questions his disinterest. She thought that he would at least be curious to know who he would be fighting. Her statement stops Ed short. He freezes in terror and horror and realization as a cold sweat runs down his face. He had not expected that he'd have to fight as well, but that was his own foolish mistake. Ed had forgotten that by the time of the joint combat training, Ed Roththaler had already been expelled. However, Ed had prevented that from happening, so now he would of course have to take part in the joint combat training and he would have to fight another student. With apprehension in his eyes, he scans the list in Janica's hand to find out who is going to be his opponent. Meanwhile, in the ring, the protagonist, Taylor, stands proud and determined with his fist beating against his chest. Taylor promises to perform to the best of his ability. Ed immediately forgets all about who he has to fight, now that his inner fanboy has activated. A smile comes upon his lips as he decides his opponent does not matter right now, since he must pay attention to Taylor. Ed just wants to watch Taylor's fight because they have a deep connection, even if Taylor doesn't know it. Though it was from a world beyond the screen, Ed lived as Taylor for a long time and played his perspective during the game. During the time he played, he hit many lows and game over moments where the game would ask if he was interested in playing again, and Ed would always choose yes. From miserable and vain bad endings to true endings that left long-lasting impressions, Ed completed the journey through the game countless times with Taylor by his side. Among the countless routes, there wasn't a single route that was not arduous and difficult. Taylor would sometimes get beat up and covered in various battle bruises with his face in a grimace, burdened by the difficulties of his path. In this new life, Ed and Taylor are now separate and Ed has to take care of himself to protect himself from a bad ending. However, he still plans to energetically and wholeheartedly cheer for Taylor. Ed wishes Taylor great success, because Taylor's success will keep the game predictable and help to guarantee a peaceful future for Ed. Ed gets so touched thinking about it, that his eyes sparkle with heartfelt tears. Suddenly, he notices the big black speakers blaring beside him, repeating an announcement over and over. The announcer is searching for the student named Lucy Merrill. The speaker announces that Lucy has to come to the arena as soon as she's ready for the practice match. Glancing around the auditorium, Ed does not see Lucy and he wonders where she went. Suddenly, they find her sleeping underneath the backup podium, just beside the fighting ring. The yelling finally reaches her and she stands to her feet with a big characteristic yawn. The announcer yells at Lucy to go finish her duel before she starts lazing around, but Lucy is in no hurry and she slowly trudges towards the podium to meet her opponent. First year, top of the class, Lucy Merrill is set to fight against Taylor McClure, the hero of the game. Ed already knows exactly how this scene is supposed to play out. Taylor is the character who is born to be a swordsman, but has never held a sword before in his life. Yet, with the first swing of his mighty sword burning with powerful fiery energy, he cuts through Lucy's lightning-quick magic. The spell she had thought would hit and take him down was miraculously blocked. This catches Lucy off guard, and while she is standing shocked, Taylor closes the distance between them swiftly. Still reeling from shock, Lucy retaliates without thinking with Lightning Strike, an intermediate-level lightning magic that completely obliterates the ring. Taylor is then completely overpowered by Lucy's reflex magic spell, but Lucy gets disqualified for using intermediate-level magic, which earns Taylor the honor of being the first to ever defeat Lucy Merrill. It was a scene so legendary that just thinking about it brings joyous tears to Ed's eyes. The match begins in real time and Taylor charges in with a brass knuckle on his hand and attacks with all his strength, just like Ed expected. However, Lucy suddenly blasts him on the spot and Taylor gets knocked down from just one hit. The entire crowd goes into shocked silence, but Ed is still hopeful, his hand curled into a determined fist. Lucy yawns lazily, the most unbothered victor in the ring as she scratches her hair. The crowd whispers in shock at the match already being over. They are greatly surprised, but they all agree that it would be impossible to win against the top student in class. They also think it was very silly of Taylor to charge barehanded at a mage like a dumb bull. They ponder his weird strategy and just figure that he's unlucky. Taylor McClure's life was always a series of trials. He was a country bumpkin and a failure of a student, an underachiever who had not gotten a single decent grade since he started school. He was a failure that was not acknowledged by anyone. He was so irrelevant to the student body that no one noticed his hand move. While everyone jumped to conclusions regarding the match, Taylor's trembling hand grasped a sword. In an outright wicked situation, the students pitied him as Taylor staggered to his feet. Even in the midst of all this despair, Taylor, burning with the drive to succeed, never lost hope. Ed watched with excitement, cheering for Taylor as he staggered to his feet. Deep inside his inner thoughts, Ed cheers Taylor on, believing strongly in Taylor's ability to succeed. With a burst of speed, Taylor launches himself at Lucy, screaming her name. Lucy turned in surprise to see him suddenly able to move, and Ed's excited grin grew wider. He waited with bated breath for Lucy to use lightning magic and keep things aligned with the plot he knew. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Ed stared in confusion and shock as Lucy retaliated with a ball of green light that immediately halted Taylor's attack. The magic expanded into the face of a growling wolf that overpowered Taylor. It is a familiar face and looks very much like the face of the forest master, Merylda. The great magic flings poor Taylor away in a mighty swirling wind tunnel of green and white. Taylor was launched into the air and crashed into the wall behind Ed. Taylor's limp body smacked against one of the great pillars of the grand auditorium, then fell from the height and crashed to the floor, landing so hard that he broke the stone of the floor that he landed on. Lucy had retaliated with magic, just like Ed expected her to, but she had not used lightning magic. Instead, wind magic danced around her, a purple glow in her eyes as she glared at Taylor's fallen body. She glared at the boy who had come close to defeating her. Taylor had come close, but he had still failed. Lucy Merrill was announced the winner of the match, and the auditorium erupted in a cheer of celebration in her honor. However, Ed was still frozen in horror and shock. He could not believe that Taylor, who was supposed to mark this event as his first victory and sear his presence in the minds of the watching crowd, somehow lost his battle against Lucy. The recognized victor of the match was confirmed by the announcer to indeed be Lucy Merrill. The announcement echoes through the auditorium, and the students go wild with cheers, throwing their hands in the air in adoration of the first year's top student. However, Ed cannot believe it, and he stares at Taylor's crumpled body in disbelief. It shocks him that the protagonist lost in his first important fight, because this means that the story is starting to change. Heartbroken, our guy watches as Taylor the hero leaves the ring with his shoulders slumped in defeat. He quickly recognizes that the current situation is likely going to be a serious problem, and he definitely cannot leave the hero alone to his own devices. Lucy used the protection of the wind spell to defeat the hero during their combat match. That spell uses the power of the wind spirit to automatically protect the user from sudden attacks. The mighty face of the wind spirit that takes the form of a powerful howling wolf is the kind of ability that uses continuous magic obtained through contracting with the high-class wind spirit Merylda. Lucy stretches out her hand and requests for some jerky, but Ed runs right past her, his focus on something entirely different. According to the scenario, Merylda and Lucy are originally two separate entities and should not have been combined. However, thanks to Miss Lazy coming to his tent and temporarily hanging around the forest, she ended up contracting with Merylda and became even stronger because of it. As Ed races away, the announcer proclaims that the next combat training match shall be held between him and the Empire's adored and respected Princess Fionia Elias Clole. Fionia is already walking out to the ring and she attempts to engage our guy in conversation, but he races right past her instead, barely sparing a second to notice her with how intensely and fast he is running. The problem is that the hero was supposed to win the fight against Lucy. Taylor was supposed to gain confidence in himself during that fight. Unfortunately, the hero lost because Ed Roth Taylor, who had not been there in the original story, now existed and remained within Sylvania Academy. Filled with guilt, our guy races after the hero and calls out to his hunched defeated back. He was not sure if his actions would have any meaning, but doing something was better than just sitting still. Ed then shouted encouraging words, telling Taylor that his efforts would surely pay off. He told the hero not to feel down and that there was nothing to be embarrassed about. Our guy is not doing any of this because he is a selfless angel. It is because deep down inside he realizes that if the hero's heart gets broken, then he will be forced to work hard in the end at fixing things that Taylor was supposed to handle. So, he floods the hero with toxic positivity and tells him to walk with pride because he did good. Our guy screams with so much energy and passion that his face goes purple. Ed knows that there are sure to be more hardships that will occur at Sylvania Academy, but the hero is the one built to face and overcome these hardships, not him. Meanwhile, we go back to Fionia to shed a little light on her story and her past. The first person to discover her innate insight ability was Emperor Cole, who told her that she was born with God's blessing. However, he was wrong about that. The life of a royal was the kind riddled with endless intrigue and conspiracy. From within that dark abyss, the golden light that was Fionia developed the insight sense by herself as a means of self-protection. That is why she is always confident. The princess could always find an ugly abyss swirling deep inside the eyes of the imperial family that looked up to her. Even when she saw through them, the Princess of Love lived as if she did not know of their wicked hearts. Now, back to the present, she faces Ed during the joint combat training. He solemnly asks Fionia to go easy on him, and she also asks him to also go easy on her. While they brace themselves in preparation for the match ahead, the other students whisper about Ed's behavior before the match and how he rushed to yell at poor defeated Taylor. They all think that our guy is surprisingly persistent in his evil, and feel wowed that he put in so much effort to make fun of someone who wasn't even able to do anything. They figured that he probably wanted to look like a nice guy by cheering for the person he'd been caught bullying. They also agreed that such an idea is disturbing, and some of the other students laugh at Ed for being that kind of person from the start. Fionia closes her eyes deep in thought. The truth is that she believes the words of the jeering students are correct. Ed Rothtailor has always been the type of person who used his noble-born position to embarrass his juniors, and when things did not work out the way he planned, he was then caught in the shameless, disgusting act of altering the test results. Ed Rothtailor was a predictable eyesore. That was what he was like in the past. However, now he started acting different. The memory of him kneeling before her and offering her the chance to win the golden bead flashes in her mind. She wonders if she truly knows all there is to know about Ed Rothtailor. Earlier, our guy did indeed race away to yell at Taylor, but there had been desperation shining in his eyes, and that was not an act. The announcer declared that the combat would begin, and all the students cheered. Before they start fighting, Fionia tells him that he confuses her, which surprises Ed. She will come to a conclusion about him using this duel between them. Fionia informs Ed that she has begun her attack. She shoots just one ball of water at Ed, starting with one just to test him. She knows that the magic he uses is wind and fire, so she wonders how he will now react to her water ball. In a dramatic battle as a finale, she plans on getting rid of that mysterious man haunting her heart. However, to her ultimate disappointment, the water ball smacks Ed right in the chest and he takes a dramatic hit. Fionia is dumbstruck with confusion as Ed rather dramatically hits the ground like he was mowed down by an asteroid. Ed declares his silent defeat. Fionia is outraged, of course. The noble princess who could not accept a freely given bead during a hunting game would hardly be thrilled about a freely given win. She knows that he saw the trajectory of the water ball and yet chose not to block it. The student body throws back their heads and laughs at how pathetic Ed is. They think his battle went even worse than Taylor's. Ed was acting all cool earlier, but he ended up knocked down with just one hit. The students also cheer for the princess with adoration in their eyes, agreeing that watching the princess fight and win was refreshing. Ed bows his thanks to Fionia and says that he learnt a lot. However, Fionia is well aware that she's the butt of this stupid joke. She only fired one shot and Ed would have learnt absolutely nothing from a battle so brief it can't even be called a fight. She then realizes that Ed has never once made eye contact with her through the entire fight. This must mean Ed is lying, and that further aggravates her. Princess Fionia Elias Cole is announced the victor and, predictably, the whole crowd cheers. Fionia is outraged, but Ed races out of the grand auditorium as soon as his duel is over. It is important for Ed to avoid the princess because she is a very important person in the present scenario. The only one more important than the princess is the main character of the world, Taylor. Ed rushes off in a desperate search for Taylor, calling him a punk while searching for him. Suddenly, a person calls out his name. Just as dumb luck, the Princess Fionia is looking for him. He asks her why she's out in the hall without any escorts. However, she will not be distracted by his questions. She angrily demands that he explain what he is, and Ed confesses that he is not sure what she's talking about. He once again tries to say that he learnt a lot from the deal, but that only angers her more. She has already figured out that he had no intention of winning, and that he just wanted to get off the stage. She was already having a hard time keeping up with the class, but the fox-like merchant redhead was only thinking about ways to take over the school. Professor Glass's grumpiness isn't getting any better. Plus, all the servants go on and on about the ways of royalty every single day. In summary, the Princess Fionia is actually quite fed up and she already has enough on her mind as it is. Meanwhile, Ed is quite surprised to find that the princess had so much pent-up frustration. While playing the game in his past life, he spent most of his time inside the mind of Taylor and never did think too deeply about the other characters. Now, he places his hands gently on the princess' shoulder and tells her to take a deep breath and calm down. Very carefully, he goes through breathing exercises with her. Fionia breaths in and out. For a moment of silence, she cannot compute what just happened. She came out to confront Ed, but somehow, he ended up helping her. With a cute blush on her cheeks, she asks him to forget about what happened. Ed agrees on the spot and is about to head off right away, but the girl is still talking. She confesses that she has a bad habit of only asking blunt questions, because she feels like she's constantly trying to guess and predict what is going on in people's thoughts due to living in the palace so long. Ed couldn't care less, and he so desperately wants to leave to find Taylor. However, Fionia must get her question answered first, so she asks him bluntly. She asks if he tried to cut ties with his family because he knew of their dark side. She demands to know if the reason he picked on Taylor was because he needed a reason to be expelled from the family. Ed can't help the cold sweat that slides down his face at her super sharp deduction. Although it is mostly wrong, the thought of the Rothtailor family having a dark side was correct. However, he can't just openly admit that. So, Ed avoids eye contact and denies everything. It is too early for Fionia to know about that anyway. She can look that far into the future. Still, the girl is shocked by his blatant lie and dismissal. She demands to know why he was cheering and supporting the person who he was trying to get expelled. She asks if he never even disliked Taylor from the start. All those questions were very blunt and to the point. Ed responds by redirecting his gaze, and lying so much that Fionia can practically visualize his nose growing longer. The girl roars at him to look her in the eye and tell it to her straight, because her insight ability is seeing through all his lies. However, Ed unrepentantly lies that he is telling the truth, which Insight detects as a lie. Fiona has no evidence, so she can't even prove that he's lying, which only further enraged her. Above all, going with the original scenario is his only hope, so Ed will not tell the truth at all. Finally, Fiona gives up and lets it go. She knows he has been staring at the door since they started their conversation, so she knows he must have something urgent to take care of. Ed bows in gratitude and makes his way towards the door. It was the first time he'd seen a new side to Fiona. She is someone who will affect the early scenario, so she's already gotten involved with so many people and events, all of which would give Ed a headache. He admits that these new issues are likely his fault since he's a new addition to the scenario. His burdens are nothing compared to the burden that the princess carries, so he pauses for a moment. Ed tells her that it is important to pay attention to complicated politics, but she should also relax a bit. After all, Sylvania Academy is not like the palace where she has to worry about every little thing. Fiona lived her life trying to see through everyone's lies, but it was the first time that someone else saw right through her. Ed rushed away immediately, still in a desperate search for Taylor. If Taylor gives up on his story, then Ed's comfortable life would be in jeopardy, the whole world might even end. So of course, our guy is relieved when he finally finds the main character sitting by himself with his broken wooden sword in hand. However, now that he's found Taylor, Ed has no idea what to say. Surprisingly, before he can speak, a girl shows up, standing defensively in front of Taylor with her arms spread. She declares that Ed Rothtaylor shall no longer bother her friend, as he's already done enough damage. Ed slowly recognizes her as Yahello, the main heroine, and basically Taylor's beloved childhood friend whom he'll protect throughout the game. Yahello fiercely remains blocking Ed's path to Taylor. She tells Ed that her man is already having a hard time, without him showing up and making things even more difficult for him. She yells that he does not need to harass him anymore. Taylor finally gets to his feet and notes his surprise that Ed is somehow still in the school. Ed meanwhile is shocked to see that the main character has revived. As the hero, Taylor's fighting spirit is the kind that never falters no matter how strong his opponent is. He gently pushes Yahello behind him and calls out Ed's name. The hero has a willpower that is clearly evident from his stance to the look in his eyes. Ed can now see that while he dueled the princess, Yahello, his childhood best friend and biggest cheerleader with the biggest melons, raced after Taylor. She ran out the door without a single glance back and encouraged Taylor, telling him that he can get through his challenges no matter what they are, since he's always been good at that. She cheers for him and tells him not to be discouraged. The hero questions Ed's presence and asks our guy if he has any business with him. Meanwhile, our guy notes that with Yahello by his side, Taylor will always be able to rise to his feet over and over again. So, Ed just mentions that the hero is great with the blade. Ed has played this game before, and he has been by Taylor's side. He has been through lots of experiences with the hero and has been with him till the end. Ed turns away from Taylor, saying that he has no schemes. Honestly, our guy figured that the hero would save the world, while he focused on surviving, but our dude had treated the hero like a pushover. However, our guy is relieved, not because the story that strayed away from the original came back on track, but because Taylor, who he'd spent so much time with in the game, was okay. That was all he needed, so he left. Taylor and Yahello stared after him in gaping disbelief, wondering why Ed was acting like he was cool. Well, after everything, there's one thing that Ed can't avoid. As our guy walks by himself, he suddenly whips around to witness a burst of fire from somewhere within the school compound. It is already time for a significant event to occur. Originally, everyone was supposed to have witnessed that even while at their seats within the battle auditorium, which was called the Nail Building. A great red dragon rages in the Nail Building. The golden daughter Lortel immediately attacks the fiery dragon beast with ice magic. Her power is so great that it freezes the entire body of the large beast. However, that's not good enough and the beast soon melts its ice with its powerful flame magic. The dragon is wielded by the spirit sorcerer Janica, and she is the one dueling against Lortel. Although Taylor cannot watch this fight from the auditorium, it is so intense and the dragon is so large that he sees the fight from where he is standing outside with Yahello. Things are going a little differently from the original plot, but it is important that Taylor is able to witness this epic battle. Taylor and Yahello watch in awe. Our guy wants the main character to keep his eyes peeled during the battle, because one of the numerous trials coming his way, and the final boss of Act 1 is the wielder of the mighty fire dragon, Janica Failover. Lortel is powerful, but even her ice magic struggles under the onslaught of fire that rains down from the dragon's throat. Janica is the only student from the second year to win against one of the new students in first year, and all the second years cheer in victory. They congratulate the happy Janica, impressed with her skill, great personality, and great ability at spirit sorcery. Janica is overjoyed by their praise and happily thanks them for their compliments. However, she notes the medics transport Lortel away. She is even congratulated as the pride of the sophomores, but she is horrified to see what she has accidentally done to Lortel. Unlike in the original, Lucy defeated Taylor, so it all ended with the main character of the joint combat training being Janica, who became the protector of the pride of the past enrolled students. This spirit girl already had a lot of friends, but this incident will make things even more frantic for her. Hopefully, Ed won't be seeing her at his camp anymore, because whenever he gets entangled with the main characters, his head starts spinning. 2 weeks pass after joint combat training. Without the main characters consistently interfering in his life, Ed can now go all in on his studies and survival without worry. He even made a fishing net so most of the food problem is somewhat solved. He also managed to upgrade his stats. His stamina, intellect, talent, and willpower upgrade. His body is even starting to shape up with well-defined muscles because his stamina stats are increasing. However, as soon as he steps out of the stream from bathing, he finds Janica haunting his camp. She gets embarrassed at his nudity. Ed is furious and demands why she suddenly showed up at his camp. He just came from fishing, so of course, he was dripping wet. Janica replies that it feels like a top-secret base, and she feels like an adventurer, which is all very exciting to her. She also wants to talk to Ed more, and she needs some advice. Ed is surprised that she has come to ask for advice, and wonders why she would choose to ask him of all people, when she's got all those other friends to hang out with. The girl goes on to explain that during the joint combat training last month, she hurt Lortel. Our guy, Ed, feels no sympathy. He knows Lortel used intermediate-level magic which was not allowed during joint combat training. Janica says that she kept trying to get over it, but she's worried that she might have overdone things. She asks if she ought to apologize to Lortel. Her friends would disapprove of her apologizing. However, our dude tells girl to do whatever she feels is right. The lovely and bubbly second-year student, Janica, was a treasure to everyone, precious in every way. So, if she ever felt guilty or self-critical, everyone would always take her side. However, she knew deep down inside that being kind did not erase wrongs that were done. Janica says it as she expected of Ed. He never takes her side unconditionally. She stretches with a happy smile. She thinks to herself that Ed has changed significantly, as he was not the same type of guy he was last year. You see, Janica was a bubbly and smiley girl, but she was also a very observant person. She notes that even when Ed asked for money during hard times, he did not show the desperation of beggars in such a predicament. She knows that he was indirectly telling her not to come close. However, those are the sides of Ed that stayed with her as a form of strange comfort. She tells him that she actually finds him reassuring. She also says that she wishes everyone in the world was like him. The next day, a bright and beautiful morning, Ed walks quickly in fear and in panic. The game The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania is a masterpiece, but few players have ever seen its ending, and newbies usually encounter several bad endings early on. An example of this is saving a girl during an ambush by kobolds in the class placement test. A player who does that would win access to the secret of the Golden Daughter. However, she then sends someone to kidnap Taylor, and just like that the player dies and Taylor ends up assassinated. In the monster slaying practice episode, if you skip the childhood friend Ayla and instead form a unit with the Golden Daughter, Ayla will fall off a cliff to her death. This is because Taylor was supposed to rescue Ayla and save her from falling off the cliff. If you protect the Golden Daughter, who does not sound very golden at this point, from the tree spirit, Tarkin, which was summoned by Janica, the player ends up burnt to death. This is why Ed must run very quickly, ignoring the one who calls him senior. However, she jumps to his front, and he asks her how long she plans on following him around. She replies that she did not think he would just grit his teeth and ignore her for so long. She is the fourth heroine of The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania, the business magnate Elite Cacellan's only daughter, Lortel Cacellan, the Golden Daughter. She smiles with angelic innocence and asks if she could kindly buy 2 hours of Senior Ed's time. To Ed, Lortel is also known as the Newbie Crusher. This girl is designated as the hidden hero, and unlike Fionia, she was treated as a villain from the start, and her true colors were only revealed in the latter half of the story. By the time players were able to understand the loneliness and anguish of the realist Lortel, they were already at a crossroads between herself and Fionia. Walking briskly, our guy reminds himself that he absolutely cannot fall for her words. Lortel, however, chases after him, saying that he could at least hear her out first, and that she just wants to help him out a little. Of course, Ed does not believe her foxy lies and he remarks that she says things that she does not mean. Acting sweet as a peach, the foxy girl asks Ed how he can say that when she holds so much respect for him as her senior. She even boldly declares that seeing him is such an inspiration to her. Honestly, it is easy to see how she came to a crossroads with Fionia with this kind of bald-faced lie. She tells our guy that she admires how he continues learning even under such difficult circumstances. She knows all the rumors about him, but she doesn't care. She even tries to laugh off his bad reputation. But through it all, Ed remains unimpressed. However, the fox girl will not be dissuaded, and she offers him 3 gold coins as a down payment, which is a lot of money for his poverty-stricken self. Foxy has noticed that Ed is rather close to Senior Janica these days, and she asks if he can help her befriend Janica. Our dude is slightly impressed by the down payment of 3 gold coins, because that kind of money could serve as a whole month's earnings for some people. However, he won't be swayed by her money. Foxy slips the money into Ed's pocket and asks him to keep it for now. This is because she is aware that the more people she has on her side, then the better for her. Ed knows that Lortel will eventually end up in a political fight with Princess Fionia for the control of the academy. He is impressed that she has already recognized the need to gain allies as soon as possible, and he smiles in acknowledgement. However, Ed is no naive and innocent soul. He knows that for the people who have been wealthy all their lives, a moment of poverty is enough to crush their heart. During that poverty, people who face such predicaments are often easily lured into their downfall by chump change. People like that eventually end up selling their families, their pride, and even themselves for the sake of a gold coin. Preying on the desperate is just that easy and simple, especially for the rich. Sadly, that is how it should have been. However, Ed manages to slip the money back into Lortel's hand during their handshake, and he leaves her staring confused at the gold in her hand. Ed walks away from certain danger, but he is also pissed. The truth was that accepting that money might have made things easier for him, but he can't afford to change the storyline. That night, Lortel Kachellan did not feel humiliated by Ed's clear-cut rejection. Instead, she paid a night visit to her senior Janica. Understanding the pros and cons, profit, and self-interest, the perfect businessman does not lose any opportunity that comes within their reach, and Lortel was a perfect businessman, or businesswoman in this case. The fox girl sparked the unrelenting spirit within her that desired to turn Janica Failover into one of her people. Lortel apologized to Janica for doing too much during the combat training, saying she just wanted to see how powerful the spirit sorcerer was. Fox Girl thinks that Janica is quite similar to the main characters in fairy tales, and that it would be much easier for her to just manipulate the spirit girl by using her guilt against herself. However, Janica surprises Lortel when she mentions that the spirits often tell her everyone's gossip. She confesses that she hears most of the conversations around the northern part of the forest thanks to them. The girl sweats, as she realizes this means that Janica heard about her conversation with Ed. Janica leans in real close to Lortel and says that you can't buy sincerity with money. Then, she laughs and asks if she acted too smug about herself. It is her first time being a senior, so she might have boasted a little, which is so embarrassing. Meanwhile, Lortel notes that Janica is not as naive as she appears. The spirit girl then waves the girl goodbye and gets going. The happy senior remarks that it takes a lot of preparation to form a contract with a high-ranked spirit. Janica has been getting a lot of support lately, so she has to work even harder. The powerful spirit sorcerer takes the moment to apologize to Fox Girl for hurting her during the joint combat training. Despite being aware of the dark side of the world, Janica is a person who maintains a surprisingly cheerful personality. Lortel stares after her figure, thinking that everything is much harder than she expected. However, she notes that the girl looked strangely on the edge. Meanwhile, back at the camp, Ed hangs up his laundry, but it all comes down in a huge gust of wind. Suddenly, someone calls out and it turns out to be the senior maid of the Sylvania's finest dormitory, the Opheles Hall, Belmaya. Belmaya happens to also be the maid who kicked him out of the dorm without a single glance back at him. She is slightly disgusted by his little setup, but she is not surprised to see him living in the woods because the lady Janica talks about him a lot. Belle remarks that she is glad to see it has been a good change for Ed, especially as he's looking way more responsible than before. Our guy knew the Opheles Hall maids were an elite group of women who perform all household chores to perfection, including feeding the students. Which meant that, inside the basket Belle had brought with her, was definitely food. Food made with the finest ingredients that this elite maid gathered from the forest. Ed thinks very deeply of the events where Belmaya could impact the main plot. While he is lost in the deep thoughts, Belle tells him that he does not need to be so respectful. She also mentions that he can also talk down to her just like he did while residing in Opheles. However, Ed immediately turns down the offer, which genuinely surprises Belle. She has never known Ed Rothtaylor to give up the opportunity to ridicule someone else. Ed smiles with joy as he cannot recall a single event where Belmaya had a direct impact on the main plot. So, he gleefully asks her about the basket she holds. Since they are both not heavily related to the plot, Ed cannot see the harm in two extras becoming friends. He heard about the explanations of various edible berries, mushrooms, and herbs from Belmaya. Ed also crafts a basket just like hers, and his crafting abilities get even better. He crafts a fish framing net and installs it into the water. He also has plenty of game with their meat drying in the sun. With this, Ed has plenty of meat and fish. His dietary needs are almost solved. He still only has the fire and wind magic, using 2 basic spells. However, he used them so many times that he reached his aim proficiency of level 10 without even noticing. He used his magic so much while chopping firewood or cooking that it increased his survival rate drastically. A proof of his growth is that he gets done with his work and the sun hasn't even set, so he gets to watch the beautiful sunset. Being honest, he is truly having fun with this quiet camp life. Suddenly, he notices a spark in the sky like a distant star, but it is way too early for the stars to be shining that bright. Ed was having fun, right until something fell from the sky and crash-landed in his camp, raising a huge cloud of dust. His precious wonderful camp got destroyed. Someone coughs in the cloud of dust and it clears to reveal Lucy in a simple dress like a nightgown. She remarks that something nearly killed her, but Ed is so dumbfounded to find Lucy of all people in his house. Lucy coughs out in the crater that she made, mumbling about how that fall just about killed her. Meanwhile, our dude is justifiably upset considering she almost killed him. He also worried about what could have been fatal to the most powerful mage. Lucy reveals that her attacker was Maya, and Ed looks at her with heavy disbelief on his face. Lucy explains that she ditched class, which is something she does often, but she noted that Maya was moody for some reason. It was so sudden that Lucy teleported out of there in fear, and she wrecked Ed's camp for no good reason. The world's most powerful mage then asks our dude if he has any jerky, but he just smacks her on the head and yells at her. Surprisingly, that actually hurts Lucy and she rubs her head in pain. Ed then realizes that Lucy is not using any protective spells. Lucy explains sulkily that she ran out of all her magic. Ed takes the opportunity to enact merciless punishment on her for destroying his precious house. It is about time that our guy gets a better and sturdier wooden house, so he visits the library to figure out how to make one. He checks out books that provide him with information such as materials for planning and other necessities. All that is left is for him to find the method of smoothing the wood and finishing the roof. Closing time in the library comes around, and a pink-haired girl with long wavy pigtails tells Ed that it is closing time. She notices he is studying hard and she remarks that it is nice to see someone study so diligently, because it really boosts her motivation to study as well. Her name is Elka Islin and she is a first year. Ed introduces himself to her as Ed Rothtailor and the girl freezes in shock. Ed is not too surprised at her reaction because of his soiled reputation. However, to Ed's shock, Elka replies that he is extremely different from what the rumors said. He even read books that are hard for her to understand in a few days. The students say that Ed acts all arrogant, but they have no idea what he really is like. She laughs and says that rumors are not to be trusted after all. Ed is so dumbfounded that all he can do is thank Elka for her support. She is about to leave when suddenly, an oppressive presence shakes through the library. Elka looks up in shock as the books come crashing down from the shelves. This reminds Ed of the final chapter of Act 1 from the game, which was called the Glasskin Showdown. A bright purple light shoots up from the school to the sky like a massive laser beam. At 11:30, the temporary camp in front of the student center is where most of the students gathered thanks to the efforts of Taylor and his friends. It had only been 2 hours after the unprecedented disaster. Ayla looks up into the sky, saying she recognizes the light from a book on spirit magic. The light is formed by a summoning rune which is used to summon the highest ranked spirit of darkness, Glasskin. Even Fiona has to acknowledge this as bad news. She knows only one person with a high enough spirit connection level to summon that many spirits. Their likely enemy can be none other than the second-year top student, Janica Failover. If Ayla is right about what is being summoned, then the barrier around the students will only buy some time. Taylor announces that if Glasskin is summoned, then there will only be more casualties. The students need to head inside the student center where they can be safe. The captain of the guard, Claire, says that people outside the barrier will surely notice in no time and help them out. However, Elvira from the first-year faculty of alchemy says that the barrier must be tough since they are dealing with the spirit of darkness. They must solve this problem from the inside, especially since Principal Obel is out of town as well. However, Clebury's Nortondale from the combat faculty is heavily against this idea, and he shakes in fear at the thought of having to deal with that loathsome beast. He explains that they will have to get through the intermediate-level spirits hanging around outside the barrier and subdue the spirit boss as well. To do that, they will need to enter the building and take down Janica. Not only that, but there's high-ranking spirits inside the building as well. 2 tall, powerful, and heavily muscled high-ranked spirits guard the inside. They are the high-ranked Berserk Fire Spirit, Tarkin, and the high-ranked Spirit of Darkness, Velosfer. Clebius panics and screams that it is a suicide mission, and he refuses to partake in it. Meanwhile, Lortel is awestruck that Janica could do all this on her own. Even for a second-year student, she thinks Janica is way too powerful. Ayla explains that most of it is Velosfer's power being used. Their senior Janica is merely a medium manifesting that ultimate power. Spirits of darkness are the natural enemies of a spirit sorcerer. They take control of the spirit sorcerer and puppet them into doing their dark bidding. The reason all spirit sorcerers feel the same sort of repulsion is because they end up becoming the prey of the spirits of darkness. Right now, poor Janica is suffering the same fate. However, how she, the most remarkable student in spirit studies, managed to command Velosfer is not known to anyone. Ziggs reminds everyone that this conversation is not what is important at the moment. They all turn to the noble Princess Fionia, who has started to sweat buckets from all this responsibility dropped on her shoulders. All the students wait patiently for their beautiful and wise princess to tell them what to do. Fionia recalls that Ed remarked on her heavy burden, and asked her why she did not have any peace of mind. She wishes that peace could be that easy for her to attain. Fionia declares that they will enter the building after an hour. However, she has no desire to put the students in danger, so the only ones entering the building will be her guard who is named Claire, and every top student of each year in class. Only those who have proven their ability will go with her to stop Janica. She asks them to make their preparations and to toughen up their minds. She will take responsibility no matter what happens. Some more of the students return with a report after assessing the resident employees of the teaching area. The Audrey Hall and the Potions Archives are in the middle of a strike, so it is unlikely that they will join this attempt to stop Janica. Fiona sighs in disappointment that only those present are the ones available to take any proper action. Fortunately, most of the students are present and safe. However, a girl shouts that someone is absent. She rushes to the front to tell the princess that she was on the way from the library. In the student library, there remains a friend of hers, who serves there as an apprentice librarian and a sophomore student. Fiona is surprised to hear this and asks for the names of the missing students. The girl shouts that the apprentice's name is Elka Islan. Ziggs is horrified to hear this. Ziggs cannot bear the thought of Elka in danger, and he immediately tries to run off and rescue her, because Elka is powerless to defend herself. Lortel tells him to calm down, since the student library is really far away. She says they need to prioritize subduing the cause of this problem, so they have to first stop Janica. Fiona also blocks his path, agreeing with Lortel. Fiona adds that there is a second year in the student library, so they need to believe that the second year will definitely protect Elka. Ziggs finds it hard to debate their logic. Fiona then asks about the other student, and the girl who brought the news seems hesitant. Ziggs rushes at her, shaking her and demanding that she reveal what she is hiding. So, the girl finally reveals that the other student is none other than Ed Rothtaylor, the infamous first-year bully. She cries that he was sitting in the library till really late in the night. She was so annoyed that she ended up leaving him to Elka, especially since everyone knows the kind of scummy guy that he is. Elka is not the kind to care about rumors like that, but no one at all is reassured by the thought of Ed Rothtaylor. In fact, they all despise him. The students further aggravate the matter by reminding everyone that Ed Rothtaylor, the shameless scummy loser, is stuck alone with a pretty girl like the library apprentice. Ziggs was beyond enraged. Fiona rushed again to block his path, and begged Ziggs to have some faith in Ed Rothtaylor of all people. However, not a single person in that crowd has faith in Ed Rothtaylor. They all go white just from Fiona suggesting it. Even Lortel looks stunned because she has no faith in Ed Rothtaylor. Ziggs's face becomes a dark thunder cloud. He looks like he can become a second final boss if they do not step out of his way. He blasts through the barrier without hesitation, hoping to save Elka from the evil spirits and from Ed Rothtaylor. The dark spirits continue to rage outside, and they rush at Ziggs as soon as he comes out of the barrier. He immediately cuts through them without so much as pausing, and continues on his way. Ziggs is the living embodiment of rage from all the awful news he has just received. He swears that if Ed so much as touches Elka, then he will beat him up to a pulp. The term rags to riches is not nearly enough to describe how miraculous the existence of Ziggs, the Spear of Grass, is. Ziggs was a descendant of the nomadic people who roamed around that land. By the time he came of age, he had already been separated from his family. Ziggs had no idea when he'd been abandoned, nor why he was abandoned. He did not even know if he would ever be able to return to his herd, his clan, his people. Ziggs learned to behead a deer before he'd even learned how to read. Before learning how to buy goods, he first mastered the art of procuring supplies from corpses on the roadside. Needless to say, this boy lived the life of a beast. He would drag his kills into the town. The blood dripping from the animals would stain the streets of the market, while the people watched in both horror and awe. They would whisper about him as he walked by. They called him the guy from the northern grasslands, the descendant of barbarians. They even passed around rumors that he devours human flesh. Yet, to his surprise, Elka asked for his name, treating him like he was human. He told her that his name was Ziggs. The girl smiled at him and said that he was like a wolf walking on two legs. Her smile was so bright that Ziggs realized that he had lived a life endlessly roaming the vast northern prairies. He had scavenged for carcasses on the side of the road. He had slept with the moon as a roof. He was a wolf pup abandoned by his pack. Ziggs realized, with tears in his eyes, that this whole time he had lived such a lonely life. The day he met Elka was the day that he met his first companion in life. To his shock, Elka and her father welcomed him into their family. Ziggs then spent his life chasing after the fast-paced life of civilization, learning magic with Elka and eating with them at a table. Soon, his savage life became a distant memory, and Elka helped give him a new haircut. After many years spent in loneliness, the wolf pup finally became a man. However, all of it was for the sake of protecting her, the light that had shone on his world of loneliness and darkness. To protect Elka, the wolf man would cut down and behead anything that came into his path. For her, he would gladly become a beast once more. Ziggs had heard rumors about Ed Rothtaylor, who he refers to as that Rothtaylor guy. He knows that Ed cheated on the test, insulted the princess, and harassed one of his juniors. To Ziggs, our guy is basically one of the worst guys around. He zoomed straight for the library, not even stopping for breaks as the thought of Elka being powerless and hurt by Ed drives him. It does not take long for the Wolfman to find Ed. Ed asks who he is, but Ziggs has no time for introductions. He grabs Ed by the collar and demands that Ed tell him where Elka is. Ed does not break his nonchalant expression when he informs Ziggs that Elka is in the reading room of floor 3. Ziggs tosses him away and zooms off without a moment's hesitation. Desperate to reunite with his beloved Elka, he throws open the door, asking loudly if she is okay, and he finds her sleeping with Ed's jacket on her body. She is sleeping so peacefully that he shakes with relief. He is grateful and rubs his head with his hand. Now that he thinks of it, he realizes that all the bookcases would be hard for a fully grown man to lift, yet they are placed around Elka like they are trying to protect her. There are even blackout curtains put up to block the berserk spirit's vision so they will not find her. He even sees a message scribbled on a blackboard for her. The message tells her not to panic when she awakens, and it tells her to remain in the safe space. Everything will be solved before dawn, so all she has to do is stay calm and block the entrance. The message also warns her to not provoke the spirits. It ends by telling her to think of her safety at all costs, and to not act rashly. Ziggs takes it all in. The move shelves, the curtain, and even the message. He realizes that someone protected Elka in his absence. He also sees blood on the jacket that is on her, and he recognizes that the blood does not belong to her, and neither does the jacket. All of this has been done by Ed. Despite being wounded, he did not care for his own body. Instead, like a saint who looks after others, Ed prioritized Elka. Our guy who sits resting against the statue of a woman gently holding someone who needs care, the light further illuminating him like he is some kind of saint. Ed went so far just to protect Elka, the Ed Rothtailor that is supposed to be the scum that everyone hates. Just 3 hours ago, when the library began to shake, Ed managed to heave Elka over his shoulders and catch the shelf that would have crushed them. Thankfully, he does a bit of strength training on a regular basis, so he was able to prevent disaster from striking. Judging by the summoning rune, this is the start of the Glasskin showdown. He looked out the window at the laser from the sky, and then just closed the curtains like the lazy jerk that he is, because he is sure Taylor will take care of it. He shouldn't even look at that place because it is flooded with the storyline's key characters. In a little while, the berserk low-rank spirits would surely come swarming into the library. He blocks the entrance so that the berserk spirits don't come in. He also uses the chance to create a perfect shelter and places Elka there. After his hard work is done, Ed plans on eating the beef jerky he brought, and to do research all night long, especially since the library will now be open indefinitely until the Janica situation is handled. Suddenly, he recalls that Janika's strong command of spirit understanding and spirit connection are the reason she is so powerful. Those two stats grow the more she interacts with spirits, and Janica happily talks to any and every spirit. Since meeting spirits itself is a domain of her talent, for Ed who can't even see spirits, raising his spirit stat is close to impossible. However, he is surprised that Janica is shooting materialized spirits, which means he is able to see them. This gives him the opportunity to grow his own combat abilities by fighting the spirits, an opportunity that Ed happily takes advantage of. He steps out of his perfect barrier and spends a good long time duking it out with the materialized spirits. He ends up boosting his ignition powers to level 12, his spirit connection to level 7, and his spirit understanding to level 7. If he had reached a sum of 15 levels for spirit connection and spirit understanding, then he might have been able to form a spirit contract. However, he pushed himself to the limit, so he will have to rest for now. As he rests, Ziggs asks what Ed was doing sitting in the hallway. Our guy figures that the Wolfman cannot turn a blind eye to him after seeing him resting there with all his bruises. He doesn't really need to lie for an answer, so Ed admits that he was training. However, Ziggs does not even slightly believe our dude. The Wolfman tells Ed that he finally understands the kind of person that is. With the sincerest look on his face, he bows to Ed and says that he truly owes him a big favor and calls him Senior Ed. The Wolfman promises that when the time comes, he will repay this debt to Ed at any cost. Ed realizes that Elka was Ziggs' lover. She was barely important enough to make an appearance in the setting, so he completely forgot about her, since he's such a dedicated Taylor fanboy. However, Ziggs is Taylor's friend who trusted Taylor from the beginning to the end of the storyline. The Wolfman is extremely important to the storyline. Looking at the situation, Ed confirms that Ziggs left the student center and came running to the library to save Elka. Since he has confirmed Elka's safety, he must hurry to go do what he's supposed to do and help the others to stop Janica. Ed tells him to return to the student center and help Taylor. He adds that as long as Ziggs does what Taylor says, then everything will work out. Ziggs is surprised and asks if our dude is actually about the Taylor McClure that he knows. After all, the Wolfman has no idea why Ed thinks so highly of Taylor, especially when he's never even talked to him. Ed says that it is less about regarding him highly and more about a compatibility issue, especially since the shell of the high-rank fire spirit, Tarkin, can only be harmed by Taylor's element/ability. In Act 1, Scene 9, Taylor learns one of his key moves, element/. To win this scenario, it is a necessary skill. As long as the guy uses that skill, he can win. Ziggs thanks our guy for the advice with another bow. Our dude dismisses him, telling him that he does not have time for messing around, and that he should move quickly. Meanwhile, Ed will rest in the library. He has given the Wolfman a huge piece of advice, so he hopes things unfold just like in the original story. This is when our hero realizes that Ziggs and Taylor are surprisingly not yet friends. The Wolfman barely even thinks of the hero. In the game's Act 1, Scene 9, during the end of semester assessment, the hero suffers one-sidedly in a duel between the Wolfmen, but he learns the element/ and cuts through the Wolfman's magic. That's when the two acknowledge each other and become friends. However, the final chapter of Act 1 is happening a month earlier than it did during the original story. This means that Act 1, Scene 9 did not even get a chance to happen. This is why Wolfman is not yet close friends with the hero, and the hero has not learned the super important element Slash. This means that right now, not a single person in the raid team can deal any damage to Tarkin. Our hero is absolutely horrified to realize that the whole plot is already falling apart, and the strike team is sure to lose against Tarkin at this rate. Back at the student center and the raid team's base, the Wolfman apologizes for the delay. He promises to make sure to pay for his wrongdoings. However, Fionia tells him to forget about it. Even if the Wolfman was around, they would have lost regardless. The entire raid team is covered in blood and bruises. They already attempted the raid and their first invasion attempt failed horribly. Claire, the guard, remarks that if they want to re-invade, it would be better to get more reinforcements. Seriously, because the professors who are adults should be contributing heavily during this attack, instead of leaving it to a gathering of students. Claire says he will join the next raid as soon as the pain in his leg subsides. Fionia tells her guard that it is alright, and that he should rest at the base, especially since he can't even walk properly. He tells her that if she really cares, she should rescind her order. However, she refuses to, saying that she also has a heart. Fortunately, their retreat was successful, but her guard is now out of the squad. Plebius, the top student of the first-year combat faculty, also got injured. Fionia cannot see a way out of this difficult predicament. She tells them that they have to do their best to eliminate Tarkin with the people they have. However, Ed shows up, reluctantly, and informs them that they do not have the time to go get Tarkin. Everyone is shocked, and partly horrified, to see him, but our guy keeps talking. Our dude says that judging from the summoning ritual's progress, it will be complete in no time. Interfering with the plot is the last thing he wants to do. But he has no choice. If everyone dies in a second failed raid attempt, he will never get the peaceful ending he so badly desires. So, he tells them to split the raid team in two, and that he will take charge of one side. His existence has already changed the story way too much. From now on, Ed Rothtailor will intervene in the storyline. Everyone is shocked to see Ed Rothtailor not only show up, but also take charge of the situation. Plebius yells at him, and yells that our guy is treating this as a joke. But right away, the Wolfman halts Plebius' outburst, saying that they should at least hear him out first. Ed explains that they must get through the fire spirit, Tarkin, that Janica summoned. They also need to deal with the spirit of darkness, Belosfer, who has overpowered the spirit sorcerer. However, as everyone already learnt during the fight against the beast, it is hard to deal damage to him because of his shell. This is why it is no longer necessary for them to go against the beast. Once one team gets Tarkin's attention, the other can enter the combat training grounds and subdue the suppressed Janica. Ed figures they switch their plan from a head-on attack to a classic bait and switch using two groups. One will serve as the luring group that distracts the beast, and the other will serve as the subduing group. Once they've gotten past the beast, they can directly confront Janica. However, Lortel is against this awful idea. They have never faced anything the beast before in combat practice, and they only manage to retreat out of pure luck. If the luring group fails to capture Tarkin's attention, then the subduing group will end up chased by the beast. If anything goes wrong, the luring group could get completely wiped out, or worse, the subduing group finds themselves facing the two high-rank spirits at once. The plan is too risky. Ed replies that they can only weigh the risks when they have other options. The most important objective here is to take down Janica. That way, the beast will also be powerless. Some of the students say that picking members for the luring group would just involve picking out students who want to commit suicide. However, Taylor, our sweet and brave protagonist, offers to be a part of the luring group. Our guy, of course, immediately shoots down that offer. The hero does not have time to play hide and seek with the beast when they need him facing down the big boy villains with his mighty sword powers. The hero insists that he is quick, and that he will gladly sacrifice himself. Of course, Ed is not having it. He shoves Taylor to the side, telling him that he is mistaken. They are not picking sacrificial lambs, and they will not split exactly in half either. Ed says that Plebius and Lortel are enough to make up the luring group with him included. The three of them will distract Tarkin. Of course, Plebius and Foxy are horrified to hear this news, and Plebius protests loudly, saying that he does not want to die. Foxgirl also respectfully declines. However, Ed insists that this is the only way for them to defeat Tarkin. Plebius and Lortel loudly protest, and our guy is visibly annoyed since they do not have much time before Janica completes the ritual. Fionia finally speaks up. Her command is that they will go with Ed's idea and divide the raid into two groups. Taylor, Fionia, Elvira, Ayla, and Ziggs shall form the group that subdues Janica. Meanwhile, Plebius, Foxy, and our guy shall be the group that lures Janica's high-rank spirit Tarkin. Lastly, her final command will be short because they are running out of time. She tells the members of the raid teams not to die at any cost. Inside the Nail Hall corridor, Tarkin stalks. Lortel asks Ed how he is going to stall for time when his opponent is a fire lizard. Ed replies that she should just do as he tells her. If things go according to plan, then they will definitely win. With those words, he, Lortel, and Plebius charge. Ed is familiar with Plebius the Gloomy from the game. Clebius is a gloomy person who is very fearful and lacks confidence, which contrasts with his actual powerful skills. Despite his negative attitude, Clebius is the top student among the freshmen of the combat faculty, so Ed reassures Mr. Gloom that he will be able to do it. Clebius is surprised that Ed is full of confidence, though he thinks Ed is a brat. He came all the way with Ed because he was convinced by the princess' firm attitude. He is worried, but since he is not alone, he feels that he might be able to muster up some courage. With a little hope in his heart, Clebius smiles. Tarkin has finally noticed them, and he is not pleased. The fire spirit roars out his displeasure, and Mr. Gloom shakes in fear at the might of the high-rank spirit. Clebius asks how he is supposed to lure Tarkin. However, when he looks behind him, he sees that Ed and Lortel are missing, and he has been left alone. Both Tarkin and Clebius are shocked at the empty space behind him. They are frozen in dumbstruck silence. Mr. Gloom feels the oppressive force of the fire spirit looming behind him, and he starts sweating buckets. He breaks out into a terrified run, screaming in despair about Ed tricking him. He curses and screams his hate as he runs around, avoiding getting hurt by Tarkin. Meanwhile, Lortel stands outside and takes a deep breath. She recalls that back in the hall, as soon as Clebius started running towards Tarkin, our guy told her to leave. He said that now that they had driven Clebius to Nail Hall's corridor, their part of the plan was done. He even believes that Clebius might be able to defeat Tarkin. Lortel smiled foxily and asked our guy if he was going to sacrifice Clebius in the end. She tells him it is not a bad idea, but he won't be able to evade the moral criticism that comes with that action. However, Ed responds that it is not a sacrifice. Mr. Gloom, despite how he looks, is a top student, and he is very resilient. He will not lose to Tarkin that easily. Also, Ed tells Foxgirl that the most important role will be hers. That is why she now stands outside the Nail Hall, outside the combat training grounds. He puts her in charge of securing the entry path for the subduing group, and landing a critical hit on Tarkin. She is amused as she channels her energy outside the hall. She decides that she should not jump to conclusions about Ed just after listening to rumors. Our guy told her that he is sure everyone will hesitate and doubt themselves, but he knows they are good at this stuff. Just as Ed said, the Fox Girl's magic activates and she successfully blows open a giant-sized hole in the wall of the Nail Hall. Her power blasts through the wall and brings it crumbling down in rubble by her feet. The members of the subduing team are shocked and ask what she is doing. Lortel smirks and just replies that they gotta go in. The girl recalls that during the joint combat training exercise, she blew up Nail Hall's ceiling using forbidden intermediate level magic. She smiles wickedly as she now understands why our dude left her to do this job. Now, the entry path is all set. All that was left was Clebius. He comes running out of the Nail Hall just as Lortel thought of him, with Tarkin on his tail. He screams all about how much he hates both our guy and Lortel. Even if the plan is successful and the raid party makes it inside without encountering Tarkin, she and Clebius will still have to deal with Tarkin, since it will run around. Going against Tarkin in the student plaza means there will be no escape. Mr. Gloom is also getting anxious and pleads for Lortel to save him as he runs towards her. She recalls another conversation with Ed when she had questioned his plan to kill Tarkin. Our guy explained that the high-ranked Tarkin could not run away. The only way to defeat him is to apprehend him. Thanks to Tarkin's shell, no attacks will work on him anyway. They already saw this during the practice match between Janica and Lortel, and Ed graciously reminds the Fox Girl that she lost that fight. Not a single raid member could even lay a scratch on Tarkin. Ed holds up a small pouch and tells Lortel that they can use what is inside to deal with Tarkin's shell. All she has to do is get ready by gathering mana. While Lortel and Clebius are handling the beast, Ed does some running on his own. The girl completely freezes Tarkin from top to bottom. It is true that without Elemental Slash there is no one in the raid party that can break through Tarkin's shell. The beast quickly breaks out of the ice, roaring in rage. At the same time, our guy kicks open a door because what they need is overwhelming firepower. Behind the door, he finds Lazy Lucy, who had been sleeping for God knows how long. There are very few people who attempt to clear all of the additional achievement conditions that are necessary to beat this part of the game, which is likely because there are a lot of conditions to meet. However, Ed has done it countless times, and he knows exactly where to find the right kind of weapon for each scenario. In this case, that weapon is Lucy. He hauls the sleeping and lazy bum onto his shoulder. Lucy mumbles about just wanting to take a nap, while Ed barely holds back his fury. He does not even understand how she is napping in the middle of all this disaster. Also, she's been sleeping for such a long time that it hardly counts as a nap anymore. Miss Lazy had nowhere to sleep because the shelter had been destroyed, thanks to her asteroid panic. So, Lucy went to the rooftop where she usually naps. She had been sleeping that entire time because she had to be excluded from the storyline. Belmaya was irritated because Janica wasn't in good shape. So, Lucy ran away, used up all of her magic, and fell asleep. It was likely a tool in the game to exclude the most overpowered person from the Janica scenario, but Ed has rushed all the way to Obel Hall, and he has fetched her. Lucy suddenly pops awake because she smells beef jerky. She does not have a lot of power right now, so our guy stuffs her full of plenty of beef jerky so that she can regain her strength. The secret pouch he had shown Lortel was full of beef jerky after all. She does not have the privilege of being a picky eater because her target is the flaming lizard. Our dude is not sure if he will get the distance right, but there's no need to worry about that. He did a lot of throwing in the military. That's right, he does not have time to run all the way back to Nail Hall, because he is not going to make it in time to help Clebius and Lortel. So, he is just going to fling Lucy from the roof of Obel Hall. Now, that Tarkin has been lured out into the grounds, it is the perfect strategy to defeat him. Our hero screams for everyone to get down as he flings Lucy, and she flies through the air like a homing missile. It is just in time too, because the beast has broken out of his ice prison, and he is preparing to charge Clebius and Lortel. Lucy flies between Tarkin, cutting off his path to the other two present. Then, she explodes like a firecracker. She activates high-rank electrokinesis, divine punishment. The light she emits is so bright that she might as well have transformed into a nuclear weapon. Her explosion is so powerful that she nearly wipes out Clebius and Lortel along with Tarkin. She just manages to throw up a shield over herself and Clebius in time. Even our guy has to hold on to the railings for dear life because the force of Lucy's explosion nearly blew him away. In some ways, this is the most important moment of all. Tarkin is a high-rank fire spirit with a tough shell, disallowing them to apprehend him, even if they were all to rush towards him together. However, after getting hit by Lucy's high-rank magic, even that tough shell shattered. Their attacks can finally do damage to him, and Ed races down the stairs. He knows that there will be a lot of exp left behind once Tarkin is eliminated. Now that he has come all the way here, he shall also partake in the spoils of battle. His eyes gleam at the anticipation of all the riches he can claim, so he sets his sights on securing the last hit. Janica recalls her mother telling her how she is so proud of her. She also recalls memories of friends. Her friends always tell her about how proud they are to be her friend. Teachers have told her that she is the hope of the sophomores, and that she was the only one who showcased proper skills during the joint combat training exercise. Another teacher smiles and says that she can always trust Janica to take care of things. Without her, the second-year class would have truly been the worst. Ever since she was a little girl, Janica always felt the weight of everyone's expectations on her. They expect her to always do the right thing. They believe that she is perfect. All those memories shatter like glass as the darkness fills her. The wall of the combat center explodes, and the subduing team finally makes their way to Janica. She welcomes them with a smile, even though the spirit of darkness, Belosfer, still has the spirit girl firmly under his wicked and unrelenting control. Meanwhile, Ed is quite sure that the scenario will end by the break of dawn. Fortunately, he has not arrived late, and he gets to Nail Hall in time to see that Clebius is still running, and Tarkin is still breathing fire all over the place. Ed notices that Lucy is missing and asks about her whereabouts. However, Lortel replies that Lucy is somewhere nearby, rolling around in a corner, typical Lucy. However, our guy thinks it would be great if Lucy finished things off till the end, but the fox girl is not sure Miss Lazy has the energy to do anything like that. Lortel used up most of all of her magic to propel two chastising ice spears at the beast, but the high-rank spirit is still holding out against them. The beast is one resilient son of a gun. Ed says that they have to slash his throat, and Fox Girl's magic is not great for that, so he will do it. However, Lortel points out that our guy is also from the faculty of magic, so his combat skills are not the best either. She says it would be best for Clebius to do it instead. However, Mr. Gloom is way too panicked to pull off a perfect cut like that. He says that he will bet on Lortel with his life on the line, so he asks her to please do it properly. She closes her eyes with a sigh, wondering if it really is easy for Ed to trust in her. In reality, this whole thing is a blind gamble. However, Ed counters and says it is not a gamble. The price of a person's life is not cheap at all. Instead, our guy is making an investment, speaking businessman language to the business girl. Lortel is amused by him, and says that investment is her area of expertise. She even admits that she likes our dude more than the princess, and since he is willing to put his life on the line for her, then she will also put her life on the line for him as well. Clebius is at the end of his rope. He cannot bring himself to keep running around, but he's just in time. As Tarkin roars, our guy charges at the beast. Just like Clebius, Ed is quite scared, but he will not stop his charge. He must get close to Tarkin. Suddenly, they hear a roar and see a giant red-clawed hand in chains reaching out towards them from the sky. Ed recognizes the hand, knowing it is Glaskin. That means that Taylor's party has entered the last phase, and things are going well. Unfortunately, a scene like that could cause a huge distraction. Tarkin uses the opportunity to shoot a blast of fire straight in the direction of our hero. Just in time, Lortel shoots a blast of ice to stop the beast's fire. Even in the midst of such a major upheaval, neither our guy or Fox Girl will make mistakes. He uses the spell Wind Blade to behead Tarkin, and the head of the heavy beast falls. The notification screen comes up, informing Ed that he has taken down the high-rank fire spirit, Tarkin. His spirit connection proficiency has increased, as well as his spirit understanding. His spirit contract slot was finally unlocked. Ed was granted the ability to make a contract with a spirit. Meanwhile, Ed stares into the red darkened sky, watching with admiration and fondness as Taylor defeats Glaskin. Taylor is indeed the hero. The sky sparks with red lightning and everyone stares into the sky, acknowledging that the difficult battle is finally over. Lortel remarks that she has met a lot of people in her life who said that they are seriously risking their lives, but most of them were cowards. Lortel is amused that they just went through a life and death crisis together, yet Ed is lacking too much sentiment. She shakes hands with our dude again, this time succeeding in slipping the 3 gold coins in his hands. Now, he owes her a favor. Ed would rather not keep in touch with Lortel, but suddenly Taylor shows up with his hair white from the power he used to defeat Glaskin. The hero still resents our guy for obvious reasons. Meanwhile, my guy admires how cool the hero looks in the manifestation of his swordsman form. Despite how much the main hero resents our guy, he bows and says that he owes him a debt. He also thanks him with great gratitude. Clebius is shocked, and he tells Taylor that he does not need to show respect to someone like Ed. Suddenly, the other heroes show up with a dark aura and they tell Clebius to shut up. It is Ziggs, Fionia, and Alvira. While Clebius sobs, Fionia also acknowledges that our hero did a lot for them. She suggests taking a recommendation to the student council, but Ed immediately stops her. Lucy was the biggest contributor in taking down Tarkin. Taylor also slayed Velosfer and Glaskin, so Ed wants them to focus on those things. Alvira is amused that Ed is tossing aside the credit for the victory. She jeers, saying it is no secret that Lucy and Taylor did a great job. However, right now they are talking about Ed, unless he's embarrassed that he helped out. Ziggs tells Alvira to show respect, and she is annoyed that they keep siding with our guy. Ed has been trying his best to keep his distance from the main characters so that it does not affect the original storyline. However, now that he looks at them together, he gets a warm and fuzzy feeling in his heart. After all, he has watched all these characters play their part and solve their own problems. Taylor will continue to grow stronger with each trial, and Ayla will grow strong along with him. Fionia will eventually embrace her destiny as a monarch, and slowly become an adult. Ziggs will find his own path in the midst of civilization. Clebius will grow in courage, and Alvira will realize that life isn't all about fun and excitement. Even Lortel grows, and will spend her life buried in gold coins. All of them are main characters with their own role to play, and at the end of their road lies the trophy called success. Knowing this, he turns away from their shine, and leaves them to live their own life. Instead, our hero heads inside of the Broken Nail Hall. Something fell off, so he had to return to check. In order to shine light on some of the protagonists, someone had to stay backstage. And sure enough, he finds Janica bruised and battered, hiding inside a chest in Nail Hall. Continuing the story, we resume from the scene where Ed finds the battered and bruised Janica hiding in a chest inside the destroyed hall. As it turns out, Lortel had a theory on why the spirit sorcerer went berserk. You see, she once happened to see her room on the night they had the conversation in the hall, and everything in there was a beautiful symbol of sincerity and gratitude. There was a board hung with so many posts of gratitude and gifts spread over her reading table that weighed down on her shoulders like rocks. Her misery came from her inability to withstand the pressure of admiration. She was obsessed with honoring all the goodwill and sincerity she received from the world with utmost diligence. Velosfer exploited that darkness and Janica went berserk. The spirit sorcerer became the hero of the joint combat training due to Lucy defeating Taylor. Merylda and Lucy formed a contract, which was why Taylor got defeated in one blow. Miss Lazy formed the contract because she frequently visited the Forest of the North, and that was because he had built the perfect place for napping in there. Everything happened a month earlier than it was supposed to, because he still existed in the story when he should have left since the first act started. She laughed, saying that had not expected Ed to find her so easily, and most of the others forgot about her, which kind of hurt. After wreaking havoc on such a magnificent stage for everyone to see, she is now in the backseat since everything is over. She would have preferred to hide a little longer, since she is about to ugly cry. Ed recalls Merylda's message to him to save Janica. It feels like he was asked to save her from ending up as the villain at the end of Act 1. However, he can't believe that since he's the only one who knows the future. He believes that Merylda was just worried about all the pressure that she was under. He was the person trying to keep his distance from her, so he would have made the perfect person for her to rely on. Unfortunately, everything failed. Janica tried to form a contract with a high spirit, but her haste during the summoning ritual made her fall prey to the spirit of darkness. This destroyed the faculty building in the process. She studied magic till late in the night. She always smiled at her family, friends, and teachers who genuinely cheered her on. But while seemingly living up to everyone's expectations, she was having a really hard time in private. Since the process was beautiful, the failure itself was also beautiful, and she remains beautiful even as she cries. Our dude is not sure how much comfort he can provide, but he tells her that she has worked very hard. Atop the stage, the main characters parade among the applause and praises of the school. However, behind the stage, it was quiet and dark. Ed and Janica are alone. Janica, the Act 1 villain, exits the stage as the main characters move forward, and she cries. Ed has witnessed the completion of the first act countless times. He raises his head in awe because for the first time, he can see the beautiful spirits that surround her. As she cries, they stay near her, and he feels like he has now properly seen Act 1 to the end. His spirit connection and spirit understanding upgrade to level 10, and many spirits take interest in him. 10 days have passed since the end of Janika's disciplinary committee trial. She acknowledged her mistakes and testified that she would willingly accept her punishment. However, during the first trial, all her professors and friends expressed utmost support. During the second trial, Fionia said that the spirit sorcerer would not be tried for the attempted murder of royalty. She testified that Janica had been overpowered by Velosfer and had not tried to intentionally hurt anyone. Lortel also came forward to address the loss incurred. The Elite Merchant Association completely compensated the funds for restoration without asking for anything in return. Although, they did add a conditional clause in the contract to reduce the customs fees on the school supplies that they distribute to half. At the end of the day, the outcome was that Janica suffered the removal of benefits given to yearly top students, the retrieval of all prizes and decorations of glory, and the disqualification from entering the Opheles Hall for the next semester. She was given probation for 10 days and suspension for 20 days, but her expulsion was revoked. It felt like they had shot a heart-touching montage in a coming-of-age drama with the number of students and teachers that rejoiced at the news. Everyone was relieved, but the students began to notice that Janica seemed under a lot of stress. So, her best friends, Clara and Annie's, work hard to alleviate her worries. They prepared for her a wonderful tea party spread, with delicious delights to chew on. They also reminded each other not to mention the disaster or bring up anything that would bother her. They eagerly welcome Janica, but she is distracted. She suddenly asks them out of the blue what the difference is between liking and loving someone, with a blush on her face. She wonders deeply if there is a difference between the two. Her friends are surprised and wonder why she'd suddenly bring that up. Embarrassed and nervous, Janica quickly said she was talking about her friend. Her friend had a dream about a beautiful garden where she was surrounded by flowers like a princess. Suddenly, a nonchalant-looking boy came riding in like a knight on a shiny steed. There was love shining in his eyes when she placed a flower garland that she'd prepared specially for him. Of course, this friend was Janica, and the knight in shining armor was Ed. Then they held hands and skipped merrily through the garden, laughing like a Disney pair. Janica says that her friend has apparently had this dream over and over. However, her friends can immediately tell she is talking about herself, since she was on probation for 10 days and would not have gotten the opportunity to meet any friends. Annie's decides to go along with it, and she asks Janica what else her friend said. Janica replied that her friend would stare into her room blankly, and suddenly that person's face would come to her mind. Unable to withstand the immense pressure of second-hand embarrassment, Annie's flees, saying that she suddenly remembered that she had to help the assistant professor. This leaves Clara by herself, diffusing the bomb that is her delicate feelings. Clara needs to approach the situation carefully, so as not to break her heart. If things go wrong, the whole student body will find out. The love story of the Janica failover would circulate everywhere. Clara suggests that she think of the situation without much complications. She says that emotions can be a mystery, and it is hard to determine which feelings are negative or positive. Clara says it is better for her to just be honest with her emotions right now. Then she backtracks and recalls this advice is supposed to be for Janica's friend. Motivated, she agrees with Clara. She also tells Janica to be careful when she talks about such sensitive topics, especially as it would not be great for her friend's reputation. She gasps in surprise and once again agrees. Clara has managed to prevent rumors from rising for now. She amicably thanks her for the genuine advice, but now needs to return to the Opheles Hall to report her suspension. Clara decides to linger in the garden for a bit while she sorts out her thoughts, and waves her a happy goodbye before her head hits the table in relief. She has now successfully defused the Janica bomb. Meanwhile, Ed recalls how he relentlessly saved money. However, thanks to Fionia's petition, he was waived from the next semester's fees. With the money he had left, Ed happily bought a few tools with his gold coins. He was surprised to see Janica waiting for him at the camp. He had avoided her all this time, but now that the first act that involved her is over, he will now interact with her casually. Ed greets her but is shocked to see her leap from where she stood to hide behind a tree. He is so confused, but Janica recalls Clara's words, telling her to be honest about her feelings. However, unable to overcome her nerves, she flees, saying she has stuff to do at Opheles Hall. For her, confessing her feelings was a task much too difficult to do. Our guy, on the other hand, was frozen with white shock. With his new tools, Ed prepares to get busy, since he is finally going to make the hut that he has long desired. On the first day, he chose the location to build the hut, a wide area under the shade that would not stand out too much. He started his work without interruption. On day 3, he gathered wood. He had become rather proficient at wind blade, so that also went smoothly. On the 4th day, he paused the wood gathering to check the end of semester results. He also got pretty high scores for his practical, and his results for the theory exams were higher than the average freshman, so all his studying was paying off. Special incidents that occurred were that Janica continued to ignore him, and her friends, Clara and Annie's, looked at him as if he should not dare show his face around them. Day 18 brought the lumber work to its near end. Ed wondered if there was someone who ever got this good at using wind blade. Day 20, and the school vacation had begun. Now, Ed could put all of his time into building the hut. A special incident occurred when he went to check the trap he'd set for the game, just to find Lucy caught in the trap and sleeping peacefully. He makes the mental note to stop using beef jerky as bait. On day 27, the senior maid, Bella Maya, came to give Ed some herbs and mushrooms. She asked how things were going with Janica, and when Ed said the spirit sorcerer might hate him, Belle tilted her head in confusion. On day 30, with one pillar as the center, the outer lumber walls collapsed. He realized that simply making and fitting joints properly was not enough to make it stable. Later that day, he once again ran into Janica's group at the bakery, and she flat out ran away the moment their eyes met. Once again, her friends glared at him like he was the problem. On day 37, Ziggs came to Ed to offer him some assistance. He also came with updates that Ed's recommendation was correct, and that Taylor was a good guy. He is satisfied that everything is once more moving as per the original storyline. Then our guy tells Ziggs which side of the house is set aside for the chimney. Ed marks the wood as the days pass. On day 45, he can sit in the house. Neither the flooring nor the walls are tacked. There's not a single piece of furniture either. It is just a hut made of crude logs of wood. However, there are outer walls and a ceiling too. If he shuts the door completely, insects can't get in. He smiles in satisfaction as his log hut is completed and his proficiency in creation once more increases. Finally, after many days of hard work, he has a home. As he rests in his log house, Janica watches, her hands curled and her cheeks flushed. Now that our guy is finally done with the walls, flooring and fireplace, all that's left is for him to put up a good fence. Then create a storage for the firewood and any extra additions. To his annoyance, he finds Lucy napping on the roof of his house. Suddenly, Janica musters up the courage to say hi. Belle had earlier informed her that she'd seen Ed building a remarkable house in the woods. The talented maid compliments his craftsmanship, and further adds that it would be a great idea to look inside, pushing the shy spirit sorcerer to go check it out. So, Janica shows up and loudly voices her curiosity about the house and how natural her curiosity is. It's only a recent build, but she loudly compliments it. When Ed asks if the spirits told her about it, she blushes since the spirits were only interested in filling her in on how hot and steamy he looked while he put that house together. So, she lies that she hasn't been talking to them much. Ed invites her inside. As Miss Lazy sleeps deeply on the roof, the spirit sorcerer gasps in amazement at all that our guy built by himself. While they sit by the fire, they talk and gist for a while, and she confesses that she owes Princess and Foxy a huge debt for letting her borrow money for tuition. He tells her that if she cannot pay them back, then she should not burden herself with it. The incident happened because she let herself get burdened with unnecessary responsibility. Everyone invested in her, but she still moved to the outdated Dex Hall because she wanted to owe them less. She now shares a room with 8 or more students who would probably envy her. In the end, the vicious cycle has not ended, so he tells her that she can drop by and visit him at any time. She is overjoyed at his offer and also says he can share any of his burdens with her. She promises to help at all costs. The second semester was approaching soon, which would mean the start of Act 2. The Sage-sealed grimoire, a little worn-out book, would end up causing a huge storm that would devour the entire academy. Lortel is at the center of it, noting that the book smells of money. Regardless, Ed thanks Janica for her offer, but he knows he won't be sharing his problems with her. Mostly because the problems that affect the school will be joyfully handled by the hero and the other main characters. Our guy will happily cheer for them from the sidelines. On a dark and stormy night, Act 2, Opheles Hall's occupation, begins. The honor students at Opheles Hall are almost guaranteed a life like nobles. They get the first choice of class seats, freedom during meals, special maids, and many other sweet perks. One day, a heavy rain fell around the time of returning to school after vacation, and carriages and boats were provided only to the students returning to Opheles Hall. Students who could not make it were given the option of relaxing for a few days. However, the inferior students from Dex Hall had to trudge through the downpour, as failure to get there on time would be met with a deduction of points. This, of course, made them frustrated and angry enough to explode into a riot in front of Opheles Hall. All of this played out due to the hands of a familiar foxy merchant. Lortel had gotten in touch with the representative for the inferior students in advance. Discontent was already through the roof. All they needed was a justification. Willain, who was adept at provoking and manipulating people with his words, would serve as a trigger for the rest. The justification became the clear discriminatory treatment of regular students who had to return to school on time despite the downpour. A proposal was drawn, suggesting a proactive change in the deadline for return, supported by acknowledging the unfair favoritism for Opheles Hall students. Opheles Hall's head maid and a part of the Academy's Administration Review Division were already on Lortel's side. They fervently supported Lortel's proposal. It got to the point that it did not matter whether the Academy accepted the proposal or not. Just the thought of needing to discuss the matter was enough to infuriate the inferior students. They amplified the entire controversy into a large vocal issue. Awfully's hall is adorned with art pieces donated by noble and affluent families. Even the walls, carpets, and hardwood furniture were crafted by artisans. The more damage to assets, the better. While the rioting students were at it, it would be best if they completely destroyed part of the Awfully's hall. The more they run amok, the more of a critical hit it will be to the finances of the academy, which is already in a predicament due to the Glasskin incident. As the negotiations for the Sage-sealed grimoire were currently underway, it granted the Elite Merchant Association a distinct advantage. The Sage-sealed grimoire is like the heart of Sylvania, yet people are willing to offer even their own hearts in times of desperation, which is exactly what Lortel is hoping for as she watches the rain come down. There is not a single ray of light in the gloomy sky, and it reminds her of the time she spent in the slums while wearing shabby rags. She can't help but mock herself for feeling relieved at the darkness the rains bring, because Sylvania Academy was too bright for her liking. The image of herself lying in utter darkness covered in dirt is more vivid to her. The traces of conspiracy on top of her desk are proof that she has lived a life of never showing the slightest sincerity, and always betraying and suspecting others while desperately struggling to survive. While doing all that, she still frantically searches for her own kind, even in Sylvania, which is full of bright and radiating people. There must be someone among them who would acknowledge the disgusting life of a gutter rat covered in filth. She was lonely. However, her true self would never change. She makes it through the miserable reality, always taking the same stance. She was the dark curtain that covered the gloomy reality behind the stage at all times, which is why gamers call her the hidden villain. The raging students protested loudly and angrily. In the original storyline, the Awfully's Hall occupation incident is a story of how the main character stops the inferior students who were provoked by Lortel. There are middle bosses from the 1st to the 5th floor of Awfully's Hall, who interrupt the main character and help the inferior students. The middle boss of the 1st floor was Tote the Decoy. He mocked Taylor by calling him a loser and got beat up by Taylor's friends, so he held a grudge against them, and was bought off by Lortel. His role was to overpower the rookie maid protecting the 1st floor. Then Tote would open Awfully's Hall's door and let the rampaging students in. They rushed in, shouting that they would make their voices heard. Once the students got through the 1st floor, the Act 2 Phase 1 middle boss Tote played a certain role. The role of stopping the main character and his friends who would come after them. Originally, this role was supposed to be Tote's, but to Ed's great disappointment, he wonders how he ended up as the middle boss, the one that Lortel bought off. Much to his annoyance, Ed became the middle boss of Act 2. To explain why this happened, let's rewind to 2 days ago. Ed was back to hunting. With no talent for combat skills, he forced himself to use a bow while hunting. Even after a semester and half of the vacation, he is still pathetic with the bow. Also, he keeps getting frequent visitors to the camp, since so many people now know that he is living in the woods. The extremely powerful Miss Lazy visits at random times. She pops through the window and asks Ed dozens of troublesome questions that he does not have time to answer. His other popular visitor is Janica, but he's happy to have her since she often comes with gifts like food and laundry techniques and helps with trivial tasks, Janica's gratitude knowing no end. When he tries to compliment her though, she blushes and acts weird, which confuses him, because she used to be so easy to read. Sometimes she acts off because she's jealous of how often Lucy comes around. The last visitor is Lortel the Golden Daughter, flouncing in like she owns the place. He figures she's trying to gather pawns to use for occupying Awfully's Hall, but he does not want to get involved. However, Lortel explains that Tote has passed out. Ed immediately asks for an explanation because this will mess with the scenario. Tote picked a fight with Taylor, like in the original, and mocked him. However, Ziggs took Tote down with one punch because he dared to mock Ed. Alvy had never seen the Wolfman that furious before, so Lortel gives Ed Tote's job. She needs someone who won't rat her out to the investigators, so she came to him thanks to his shitty reputation. She figures he must want revenge since he did get kicked out of Awfully's Hall. He doesn't want to do it, but he has a few conditions for taking the job. He bargains 20 gold coins to carry out a moderate role. He will just set everything back where it belongs. The Awfully's Hall occupation started before the fight over the Sage-sealed grimoire started, and Lortel's plot is to drive the Academy finance into madness. In the storyline, she succeeds with her conspiracy and forms Merchantry, a profitable group in the Academy, which creates a structure that rivals the Princess's Student Association. The idealist saw, and the realistic, Merchantry. What matters is who Taylor chooses, because that side becomes the winner. Ed just needs to remain a spectator and join the group that seems like they'll win since he needs to survive too. Janica comes to visit, happy that she can come and go like she's on a camping trip. But Ed has to stay alone even during rainy days. Janica is about to move from Awfully's to Dex now that the semester is over. She reminds Ed to come to her if he ever needs anything. He agrees and she has extra pillows, cushions, clocks, and lanterns, many necessities and supplies. Dex is smaller and it feels a waste to throw those things away. Ed agrees to accept anything she does not want and Janica is overjoyed. Then they note that Lucy often stands on the roof in the rain. Her extraordinary powers don't come for free, and she has lived a life of laziness as an excuse, turning her eyes away from her promised fate for many years. She only reflected on her life during rainy days. Ed says he doesn't really pay attention to her, and Janica is thrilled to hear this. When the Opheles Hall gets occupied, protection runes will activate on a large scale and lock all students inside their rooms. Janica can get out on her own, but Ed asks for a favor. He tells her to come to the Rose Garden in front of Opheles Hall at 9 o'clock in the evening, and says that he'll tell her the reason on the next day. She starts blushing like crazy with joy. Ed doesn't want Janica in the building in case something happens. The Rose Garden is far enough away and she can avoid the rain. She runs off, blushing hard like a beacon, and Ed sits and watches the rain. Around the start of the semester, the rain will stop, then he can enjoy the bright sunny sky. The long vacation is ending soon. Finally, 9 p.m. arrives. Ziggs is doing his exercises in his room, pondering emotional control, when he spots Ed outside the window, racing to the dorm. Most of the maids have gathered in the meeting room to discuss an important agenda. They'll block the entrance once all the maids are in. The person in command was bought off, so things are working quickly. The maid working with Ed also prepped goods that were asked for in advance. Preparations are all done. Our guy stands beside a mysterious bucket. The Opheles Hall occupation begins and the inferior students rampage, led by their rep Willain. The doors are opened and they race inside. Willain is surprised to see Ed is the one Lortel bought off. Ed gives a half-assed speech about siding with Willain and believing in his cause since he got kicked out of Opheles Hall. The inferior rep is somehow very touched by his very fake words. Our dude, meanwhile, is annoyed that Willain has caused all this mess and sends him upstairs so that the plot can move on. The inferior rep will end up taking the blame for the chaos in the end. Our guy does not stop the fleeing maid either, as her superiors are all locked up, so she has no one to report to. The chief maid Alice, who controls the protection runes, is in Lortel's hands. So, all the students are detained in their rooms by the protection runes. Everything is going as planned, and the hidden villain, Lortel, finally comes to the stage. Moving on, we know that the academy employees will repress the rampaging students in no time, so our party needs to finish things quickly. This is when Lortel suddenly asks Ed if he's ever killed someone. He of course replies that he hasn't, and she admits that she has not either. However, she's done things similar to killing people in a need to survive. She's crushed lives and stabbed others in the back. She lived her life forgiving her own sins and making excuses for herself as she built up her wealth, which is precisely how she got the name of the Golden Daughter. She knows she deserves no sympathy, so she searches for it from others. Like a possessed person, she asks if he can sympathize with her. Good or evil, all people feel lonely, and some search for people who roll in the dirt like them. They only find redemption in people who are as bad as they are. However, Ed does not sympathize with her, and he tells her that she needs to take responsibility for her own decisions. She quickly masks into her nonchalant self and says that they need to get to work since they don't have time to waste. Our guy relaxes in relief now that Foxy will talk to Alice about their plan going forward. Once they make the defense magic of Opheles Hall go berserk, and hand over the command of the runes to Willain, the story will unfold with current events intensifying. Willain, packed with the dense protection of Opheles Hall's defense spells, will transform into the boss of the 4th stage. This scenario is about defeating Willain, who will lose his mind and go berserk. All our dude has to do is sit quietly and wait for the hero to storm into Opheles Hall. He'll put up a mediocre fight and lose, then Taylor will handle the rest. He does not mind taking a few hits as he views that as a necessary sacrifice. Meanwhile, Janica sits in the Rose Garden, dressed warmly as she waits for Ed. She even finds a note he left for her, telling her that he'll be a little late. She blushes, thinking he is preparing something special. The golden horse carriage near the garden was not important to her, and she wasn't going to leave because she'd thought about him for the past 3 days, to the point that she couldn't even sleep at night. Despite everything, Janica had kept tabs on everything that happened at Ed's camp with the help of Merylda, and she knew everyone who visited. Unfortunately, most of the visitors were women, and that was very heartbreaking to her. That's why she was going to wait for him no matter what. That was until she made up her mind to switch up her hairpin, so guess who'll be showing up unexpectedly at Opheles Hall? Alvira, meanwhile, is freaking out about needing to enter Opheles to preserve her herbs with magic. She drags Taylor and Ayla with her to help her. Redhead is so upset that Ayla fears she will go on a rampage. The angry Redhead rushes in with the other 2 close behind her, and who do they find waiting but our main dude? The hero is surprised to see him and asks why he's here. Alvira can see the traces of the students that stormed through, and the entire place is a mess. Ed sits silently with his back to the stairs. She did not expect that he of all people would try to stop them. He confirms her guess and says that he cannot let them pass, like he's Gandalf. Alvira laughs, knowing he can't beat them alone since the people on her side are very skilled. Taylor, on the other hand, cannot understand why our dude would stand against them, and demands to know what is happening. As he gives no response, the hero charges at our dude. Ed of course blocks him with magic, and Alvira identifies it as the basic spell Wind Blade. However, the spell has now become so advanced thanks to his continuous use of it, that it does a lot of damage. The students at Opheles panic. Well, Clebius panics, wondering what is going on. Elvira, Taylor, and Ayla fell from surprise at the attack, and Elvira realized with horror that he cut her hair. She realizes he's going to be serious about this fight and reaches for her potions, but Ed sets the place on fire with ignition. The battlefield was set, so his judgment was quick and precise. Meanwhile, Elvira thinks to herself that Ed is showing talent far beyond just high mage proficiency. As the alchemy faculty's top student, Elvira represents their main forces. However, the biggest flaw of alchemy is that, without relying on magic tools or elixirs, their raw combat power is close to zero. Most alchemy students carry a magic ring or necklace with them. But Elvira had never thought a genius like her would need that kind of thing. Rookie mistake, because it seems Ed knew that as well. He dropped the chandelier and used the opening to cast Firewall, just to separate Elvira from her bag. However, she wonders why he went for the strap instead of destroying her bag and its precious contents. She is not out of options yet, and she cast a fire-resistant formula, amplified its strength, and made it go berserk. Meanwhile, Ayla hurriedly sought out a spell to put out the fire. Overwhelmed by the flames, she screams and Taylor yells at her to get her act together. She is usually confident in her magic, but her combat ability is average at best. Ed keeps targeting her, which makes it hard for the hero to leave her side and get close to him. Elvira, however, is ready to make an opening for the hero to have a shot at knocking down our guy. Her berserk fire-resistant bunny launches at our dude, and the hero follows behind, determined to put a stop to Ed. The alchemist redhead loves Taylor's energy and wraps herself in a cloth, launching into the fire to Ayla's shock. She manages to get to her bag of potions. It's game on now. Ed throws Wind Blade at her, but she flings at him a chemical reagent prepared by dicing up unique flowers and mushrooms. This chemical works by controlling the release of magic and temporarily subduing the products that result from magic formulas. Our dude successfully takes down the Berserker Bunny, but the hero uses the chance to race at Ed. However, our dude suddenly turns tail and runs. He brings down a huge table between them and sets it on fire. Elvira is horrified, screaming that a fire would surely kill all the students trapped in there. However, the hero is sure he can slash through any fire created by magic with his elemental slash. They need to make haste while Elvira's chemical reagent is in action. Taylor rushes at Ed, even as Elvira shouts for him to wait. The windows are open wide enough for all the smoke to escape, and even the carpet that could catch fire is not there. There are no flammable objects in sight, which means it is a trap. Ed notches a bow and prepares to fire. The hero did not expect our guy to have a weapon, but he could easily deflect the shot anyway. However, to the hero's horror, Ed fires at Ayla. Ayla can't even use basic spells right now. However, the alchemy redhead saves Ayla, using Claw Hand, and stops the arrow before it hits her. Elvira is surprised to see the arrowhead is covered with cloth, so Ed did not even plan on hurting her. Taylor charges in, ignoring Elvira's warnings. Ed is waiting for something. Clebius has started to panic inside of his room, as the Act 2 of the final chapter of the Opheles Hall incident kicks into gear. Clebius escapes his room, and our guy can finally relax. The hero takes the opportunity to knock him into next week. Elvira is absolutely shocked to see Ed go flying. Taylor yells at the defeated Ed, asking why he dared to go so far. Even the redhead is pissed because she feels like he was just playing with them the whole time. Everything he did proves that he was not fighting them seriously. He tells them that if they're done, they can go upstairs and get busy. Elvira asks our dude why he let them win, which confuses Taylor and Ayla. She is very enraged that he toyed with them. Unfortunately, right at this moment, Janica emerges from her room after picking out a flower pin. Her pure love might be naive and delusional, but she is free to imagine happy thoughts if she so desires. However, the difference between imagination and reality can be cruel at times. The boy she thought would be at the pavilion all dressed up was on the ground, covered in blood, after being attacked by a suspicious group of people. There was no way our ever-sweet spirit sorcerer was going to take that kindly, and Janica's eyes flamed red. Janica would admit that it would be lying if she said something did not feel out of place. Ed could have gotten swept into some unexpected situation. Despite her concern, based on his simple life and the way he'd acted during the Glasskin incident, she felt certain that he would figure out the problem somehow. It was not until the flaw in such a complacent way of thinking was poked that she started to reflect on it. She had offered to help if he was in trouble, but Ed had not asked for help. The reason he lured her outside Opheles Hall, even going so far as to write her a letter, which was unlike himself. It was the same reason he fought alone till he was covered with blood, to keep Janica outside of the battlefield since she had already received several punishments because of the Glasskin incident. She doesn't entirely know what happened, but he was so considerate to ensure that she would not get swept up in all this. While she was busy worrying about her looks, Ed fought alone. Meanwhile, Taylor is happy to see her, oblivious to her rage. He tells her all about how Ed tried to stop them from going upstairs. Too late. Elvira tries to warn him that Janica has appeared as a foe instead of a friend. She doesn't really care about what's going on, but she won't forgive them for hurting her crush. Our guy tries to stop her, shouting her name. However, Janica summons all the spirits and tells him to wait because she's going to handle this. She's summoned intermediate grade spirits of the 4 elements and others that basically make up a battalion. Alvira quickly tries to get Taylor and the others to run since there is no way they can defeat the top student among the second years of the whole faculty of magic. They were already barely winning against our dude. Taylor already knew they would not beat the overpowered spirit sorcerer, and he also knew this takeover was not normal based on how Ed had been acting. However, the spirit of the hero burned within him. He could not back down because students could get hurt. He reminded Elvira that they had to secure her herbs and stood his ground like a hero. Our guy was impressed, but also held the hero by his collar and tossed him aside. He promised the hero that he would take care of his girl so that Taylor could go to the second floor. They can't believe he's letting them go after he tried to stop them. But he just yells that he changed his mind and tells them to hurry up. Redhead can't believe that he can stop the spirits alone, but Ed insists that they get moving and apologizes for tearing her back. They are confused but they finally listen and get going. Janica approaches, her eyes glowing red. She pauses when she sees Ed and tells him that she will handle the rest without him having to explain anything. However, he gently places his hands on her shoulder and reassures her that he is fine. Janica gets knocked out of the rage mood by the power of Crush, her face flushing because our guy is touching her. He tells her to please send the spirits away, as the wind is so strong that he can barely hold on. The spirits feel underwhelmed as they are quickly sent away. To the heroic trio's shock, he actually managed to single-handedly stop her. He gestures for them to hurry and go, as there's probably not much time left. Exhausted, Ed collapses. Janica scolds him as she helps him, asking him why he keeps getting hurt, and why he did not ask her for help. He assures her that he'll ask for her aid in the right situation. She thinks the trio is excessive in beating him up, and she will get really angry with them the next time they meet. She asks him to promise to stop getting hurt and he thanks her for worrying. The plan went a little astray, but he did his job as the first floor boss and now he can rest assured and focus on his camp. However, just as he's about to relax, Janica informs him of the huge golden carriage she saw by the rose garden. The carriage shaped like a golden crown is the symbol of the Elite Merchant Association. Lortel's adoptive father, and the one who killed her biological father, the fake boss, will eventually disappear after losing to her. In the struggle of the second act's last episode, Sage sealed Grimoire the Golden King Elite. More importantly, the fact that he came to the